Okay, welcome everyone to the Union County Public Schools July 13th board meeting. I would like to call Chaplain Vic Weaver to the front for an invocation.
Father God, we come to you in the name that is above every name, the name of Jesus, and we thank you for our country. We thank you for the holiday that we have just celebrated, the 4th of July, where we honored our men and women of our armed forces, those that bled and died and those that serve now. And Father, just like they shed their blood for our freedom, you sent your son to shed his blood for our freedom from our sins on Calvary, and we thank you for that. Father, we ask tonight that you just continue to bless us. Just ask that you continue to be with us and just help us as we conduct the business of the Union County Public School System that needs to be talked about. And Father, we thank you for this board. I ask your blessing on each and every one of them. And I just thank you for their support staff and ask that you be with us tonight. And we're going to give you this meeting in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. If everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board, that brings us to the approval of the agenda.
We have some additions to the agenda. After number 5, I'd like to add 6, superintendent contract and salary. And after that, I'd like a new 7, that's superintendent cabinet staff, 7 of them, contracts and salaries. And then move mask option to 8, CAC to 9, and comments to 10.
Okay, that sounds good. Are there any other amendments?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment I'd like to add to the agenda entitled Amendment to Policy 3.2A, Employee Code of Ethics and Standards of Conduct at the appropriate place deemed by the chair.
Let's do that.
Let's do it after CAC.
After CAC.
Yeah.
So that'll become 10 and board comments is 11.
Okay.
So I move that we approve the amended agenda.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. That brings us to public comments. Tonight, we do have a waiting list. As there is a significant wait list, the board will need to consider whether to expand public comments period of time. Is there a motion to expand public comments for a period up to an additional 30 minutes?
So move.
Second.
No, we moved to 30 minutes, correct?
An
It says
additional
up to an additional 30 minutes.
Yes, it's a full 30.
for a total of 60 minutes
Total of
tonight.
60.
Correct.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion passes. We will add an additional 30 minutes tonight. At every regular board meeting, 30 minutes has been allotted for public comments. The board will not respond to public comments. However, a member may ask the chair to obtain clarification. Speakers will be called in the order that they signed up to speak. If a speaker is not present when his or her name is called, the opportunity to speak will be considered waived. Only persons signed up may speak. Speakers may not give their time to another person or have someone speak on their behalf. Individuals may address the board for a maximum of 3 minutes. Any person who is an appointed representative for a group may address the board for 5 minutes. A representative must state his or her affiliation prior to speaking or will be assigned the 3-minute period. The board will not hear in open session complaints about the performance of school personnel, personnel issues, or confidential student issues. Should a speaker wish to seek information or share items that may not be shared during public comments, our staff are available to address your concerns or provide information. Dr. Brad Breedlove, our Chief Academic Officer, is here tonight. Dr. Bashan Harris, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. And Jared McCraw, Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, are here to assist. So we will allow the first 30 minutes and then proceed immediately to the next 30 minutes. And the policy says that it's 60 minutes total. We will have to suspend public comments tonight. Okay. So the list that I have begins with Brian Helms. When he starts.
Hey, good evening. My name is Brian Helms. Thanks for allowing me to speak again tonight. Union County stands at a crossroads. Parents and this board have to decide if we want our kids to be taught CRT and if we will succumb to the racial division and Marxist ideology that it sows in the minds of our children. Although CRT may not be officially supported by UCPS, you are deceived if you believe that it isn't present. An elementary school in this county recently used a book entitled Not My Idea, a Book About Whiteness, for a diversity assignment for fourth graders. Why are we teaching diversity for fourth graders? This title offers biased opinions on police brutality, so-called white privilege, and vilifies white Americans. It even goes so far as to insinuate that real history isn't even being taught in schools. It includes statements such as, skin color makes a difference in how the world sees you. Racism is a white person's problem, and we're all caught up in it. That's quotes from the book. Last month, there were many speakers who addressed CRT. Many of them weren't even from Union County or even North Carolina. Some were even brought in by paid activist organizations. I'm sure that these folks would support this book, but what if the book was entitled Not My Idea, a Story About Blackness? How would it be received then? Many, if not all of you, are on this board are parents. So let me ask, is this what you want taught to your children? I, for one, do not. No child should ever be ashamed of the color of their skin, no matter what it is, and they shouldn't be taught to do so. You cannot eliminate racism with more racism. Our children should not be taught to discriminate and that a double standard is okay. It's not okay. Yet a double standard exists, and it even continues for our children in regard to masks. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution promises equal protection and limits states and federal government's power to discriminate. While adults are no longer bound by mask mandates, children in school are facing discrimination by the current requirements of the toolkit. Now, where is their equal protection? I call upon this board to do 3 things tonight. Number 1, once and for all, adopt an unconditional mask optional policy for all UCPS students. Number 2, adopt a formal policy banning CRT, SEL, and all related philosophies that focus on racial bias. Number 3, form a parental advisory committee comprised of parents to monitor media resources and report possible infractions of CRT being incorporated into our curriculum. Dr. Breedlove, Dr. Houlihan cannot be in every classroom. One of the things that truly sets UCPS apart is the collaboration between parents, teachers, and this board. Collaboration is needed now more than ever. Let us not forget the words of Thomas Jefferson. If a law is unjust, a man is not only right to disobey it, but he is obligated to do so. The time to take a stand is now, while we still have some ground left. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jessica Cook.
Good evening. Tonight I wanted to speak publicly about the need for increased teacher and curriculum oversight. This particular issue came to my attention when I watched the June 17th curriculum meeting, when the chief academic officer revealed that teachers can and are actually encouraged to bring supplemental materials into the classroom. This includes anything off the internet without prior approval. This was shocking to me. We've been coming to you for months saying that we do not want critical race theory taught in our schools. You've been telling us to just sit back and let the state legislature handle it. They have Bill 324. But the truth is, it does not matter if the state legislature bans the teaching of critical race theory or other Marxist ideologies if the school system is lax in oversight. That's a wide open door to allowing indoctrination into UCPS. In fact, it's already crept in, as Brian has already given an example of. To the teachers that are listening, we are not against you, nor do I think that most teachers are trying to sneak in indoctrination. But you have to understand, these are our children. And the chief academic officer revealed himself that there is very little oversight. If one teacher abuses this freedom, that's one too many. Others try to say there is no plan to teach CRT in schools. Well, we know that is not true. The National Education Association owned up to their deception when they voted to support teaching of CRT in K-12 schools at their annual assembly. We also have North Carolina Association of Educators president saying, we, the undersigned educators, refuse to lie to young people about the U.S. history and current events regardless of the law. See there, they're going to teach it regardless of the law. Furthermore, there are several teacher Facebook groups where some UPS teachers are not only echoing this brazen attitude, but are also doxing local parents who are speaking out against CRT on their Facebook groups. These posts are full of vulgar language towards parents. They have suggested posting home addresses and where these parents work, and that is unacceptable. I don't know how to say this more plainly. We are not co-parenting with teachers, the school, or any teachers association. When we have teachers with an agenda contrary to what parents want, with little teacher oversight, we have a huge problem. So I'm asking you tonight, please implement true oversight. Please put in teaching expectations that are clearly laid out where teachers cannot teach whatever they want. Require published lesson plans for all grades and subjects so parents can see before they are taught. Please get back to paper-bound textbooks. Create a parental advisory, and please prohibit the doxing of parents on local Facebook groups.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jess Atherton. Melissa Filanowitz. Okay, she's not here. Christy Dao with Moms for Liberty. She will receive 5 minutes.
I want to say thank you for serving on this board and for listening to our concerns. I will be speaking today about critical race theory, also known as CRT, and provide a background to show why we as parents are concerned with this ideology being taught in our schools. Let me first start by saying that critical race theory is not a civil rights movement, which seeks to provide equal opportunity without regard to race. CRT is an ideology not based on facts or data that makes race the focus through which all aspects of American life are analyzed in order to change the laws and institutions in society. It categorizes people based on race, focuses on oppression, oppressor, oppressed classes, privilege, and rejects colorblindness. This ideology originally was taught in the legal field and is not meant for grade school. CRT is a Marxist ideology. It was originated by a group of socialist and communist thinkers. They set up the Frankfurt School in New York City with the goal to break down the cultural barriers in America and seek the destruction of traditional religion, the collapse of sexual morality, the deliberate undermining of the family, and demolish the existing institutions that run our government. The Frankfurt School uses education as a tool for advancing their ideas. Because they knew that Americans were still devoted to God, country, family, and individual liberty, the Frankfurt School and CRT tried to hide its motives by changing their wording. For instance, instead of attacking the family, they attack patriarchy, or they have changed their wording from critical race theory to culturally responsive teaching, but the agenda remains the same. CRT intends to create social justice warriors out of our children and to divide us. This theory observes that people that ignore race are not demonstrating neutrality, but are racist. Our children will be taught to look for racism in every situation and interaction, which is a horrible way for a child to look at life. They will eventually call each other out and reject one another, because tolerating racism is also considered a form of racism that would have to be stopped. The idea is for everyone to be anti-racist, which basically means they want you taking action against whatever is deemed racist. So if our children are not advocating or standing up for other minorities to create changes in the laws, they will be labeled as racist. The discussion around bringing CRT into the K-12 schools has resurfaced recently with the rise of activism and social justice movements, and by the same groups who support burning our cities and vandalizing our businesses. Why in the world would we trust that they know what is best for our children? We are seeing politicians and Americans that support CRT say the flag is racist and a symbol of hatred because they believe America is racist. July 4th celebrations are only for white freedom and Black people are not free. This mindset is destructive and resets the fundamental ideas on which our republic is based and basically says that our democracy is a lie. Last week, the largest teachers union in the country, the NEA, declared that all K-12 schools must teach children that white supremacy, anti-Blackness, racism are embedded in every aspect of American society. Who are they to make that judgment? Now, if you think that some of this critical race theory is not inching its way into our schools, then you're surely mistaken. I will give you a personal example of what happened to my daughter this week, 6 weeks before school got out. She came home from school and the first thing she said was, "Mom, why was a 13-year-old boy of color shot by the police?" I asked where she had heard this, and she said her social studies teacher said there was a 13-year-old boy of color that was running from the police. He had a gun in his hand and threw it off to the side, and the police shot him. It was a sad situation, but the teacher failed to provide all the details about this incident objectively. Why did this teacher bring up this divisive incident to sixth grade students with the intention not to fully disclose all the details or all points of view? Teachers cannot cherry pick which information to provide and need to leave their political viewpoints at home. We do not want partisan politics shaping our students. I've recently viewed some of the unpacking documents for the new social studies curriculum. Just in the glossary alone, there are definitions for systemic racism, equity, privilege, and gender identity, which indicates to me that they want CRT to be taught in K through 12. It is divisive to its core. Our UCPS board needs to focus on teaching the fundamental skills of reading, writing, math, science, and get our children up to par. We need a policy similar to what Brunswick County School Board is implementing, and I encourage you to look into it. I have some examples of what teachers and students are being trained in and taught in CMS and Cabarrus County that I will pass out to you. This is what we do not want in our schools. Also, one more. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Elena Brown. She will get 5 minutes for representing the UCAE.
Good evening. My name is Elena Brown, and this is Pam Carlton. We are with UCAE, and we are here tonight to highlight the need for safe and equitable in-person instruction for students as they return to school next month. I think we can all agree that children belong in the classroom with their teachers and friends. The CDC agrees with that too, and they have lots of data from the past 18 months to show us how we can do that safely and responsibly. The CDC is also clear in their updated guidance from July 9th. It says that unvaccinated students and staff need to continue to use face coverings indoors. Most of our students are not yet able to receive the vaccine. While we can all overwhelmingly agree that in-person instruction is a top priority for students, it must be executed with safety, caution, and equity in mind. Putting unvaccinated people together in crowded spaces indoors puts students and staff at risk, particularly medically fragile students and those with pre-existing conditions. That is, unless layered mitigation strategies are in place. These strategies include face coverings, social distance of at least 3 feet, and improved ventilation. Make no mistake, going against CDC guidance with optional masks will force UCPS students to be excluded from school. Many cannot risk being indoors with unmasked individuals, particularly with the rise of the Delta variant. According to the CDC and every other respected health organization in the world, masks work when everyone is wearing them and are worn to protect others more than just oneself. Therefore, this notion of optional masks being a safe option is simply false, point blank, because that's just not how masks work. Don't we all have a basic understanding of how masks work to protect others, like our peers and loved ones at this stage in the pandemic? In addition to the elevated risks of optional masks, Union County has stated it is no longer going to provide a virtual option for families who are not ready to assume the risk of sending their child to in-person school. These are the children of tax-paying Union County residents, and they deserve equal access to public education just as much as anyone else. Don't let anyone try to tell you that optional masks give everyone a choice, because that is simply false. What gives everyone a choice is following the CDC and waiting just a tiny bit longer for optional masks until all students have had the chance to get vaccinated. My son Edward is 9 and has severe asthma. His pediatrician said he cannot return unless masks are required for all unvaccinated people and there is social distance. His best friend has type 1 diabetes and cannot attend school with optional masks either. And to protect him, his siblings won't be able to attend either. I talked to another parent last week whose child is a cancer survivor and cannot go into an optional mask classroom. Even today, I talked to a UCPS staff member who said their child and their friends' children cannot attend with optional masks either. We are all scrambling. Do you understand that by acting in haste, you would be excluding medically fragile children from school? There are many more stories like these, except they are not just stories. They are Team UCPS students to whom we all owe a public education. They are taxpayers just like everyone else. And the North Carolina Supreme Court ruled in 1997 that all students must be provided a quality public education. We are responsible for providing that education to students. Since there are families who would need to homeschool if masks become optional in an effort to protect their children from infection, our county would be at risk of losing valuable educators due to drops in enrollment. We cannot afford to lose funding, all because we can't wait a few short months more to ditch the masks. Masks may be uncomfortable, but they are necessary, and it's literally the least we can do to protect others and keep our students in schools where they belong. Another consideration is how this will negatively affect families financially when one parent has to stop working to take a leave of absence to homeschool their child because they were forced out of school. How will you handle teachers who will need to take a leave to homeschool their medically fragile children? These things will come up, so I hope there are plans in place. On behalf of all medically high-risk students and their parents, I urge you to consider all students' rights to a safe public education and realize that optional masking does not work. Mask protects others rather than the one wearing them. We hope that masks will not be needed all year, but we at least need to wait a few more months until all families have had the choice, not requirement, but the choice to be fully vaccinated. Public health should not be political. Partisanship in public schools is toxic and students suffer for it. Let's put our students and staff first, all of them. When you took this oath, you promised to serve all, not just the ones you align with politically. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Laura Casey.
Thank you. I'm Laura Casey from Waxhaw. Justice is seeking fairness and equality in how we both apply laws and policies so that all those affected are left feeling that they are given a fair shake and a just outcome. Today before you, the board, will be 2 major items. 1, a vote on making masks optional, and 2, hearing the recommendations from the CAC on diversity. Making masks optional is a justice issue, especially as, make no mistake, making masks optional is very much the equivalent of removing masks. Masking has been proven by CDC studies, by Wake Forest, by Duke Medical, and by so many more to be the single most effective measure for reducing spread and hospitalizations among school-aged children if everyone in the environment wears them. When masking populations drop below 60%, masks become ineffective as a safety measure, the same as having them removed. That we were able to go back to school safely through the end of the school year is a testament to the sense of requiring masks. Optional masking is, quite frankly, a deeply unfair proposition for parents like me. Due to my son's immune conditions, our doctors have advised we consider other options if masks are made optional. Unfortunately, as a single mother, I do not have other options, nor will many parents of medically vulnerable children who will suffer a greater impact than my student. At the same time, I am not unsympathetic to those that wish to remove masks. There are very valid reasons to do so for select students with severe sensory issues, autistic students with documented anxiety and severe phobias. For these students, extended mask wearing can create an environment where it is impossible to focus on their own education. And this is the unfair position that the board is in, to choose between two valid extremes. Students who require masks will be looking for their ADA guaranteed compensatory services, and parents may be suing for health outcomes of their students if you move to make masks optional. And I hope the board, if you do move forward, intends to earmark the appropriate amount of the budget for those legally required compensatory services and lawsuits that may come, and that you've done enough research to feel confident in what that number will be. This is also why I very much hope that the recommendations from the CAC on diversity include an equity officer. Set aside for a minute the ongoing culture war over curriculum and set aside any misgivings you have about DEI. Recognize what an officer will do, particularly in a situation such as this. They are educated on ADA, Title IX, and other laws that govern our duties with regard to equality. The professionals in balancing equal needs and requirements of concerned populations, and experts in understanding the resources and constraints of a district, what accommodation options are available, and in gathering the data needed to recommend solutions that, taking all of this into account, can allow for a safe and equitable school environment for all parties, one where those who need masks are protected and the parents who want options can access them without undue burdens upon each other. Without the equity officer, you will be taking on all the responsibility for this position. You are all professionals in your own fields: insurance, legal advice, religious guidance, parenthood. I trust that you understand the benefit of having a professional on your team. Hiring a professional to act as the arbiter of these decisions will lead to better outcomes and allow the board to approve informed decisions to protect our district from most harm. The opportunity to make parents happy and keep students safe and in school where they belong. Thank you.
Ms. Casey. Okay, the next speaker is Alicia Preston.
My name is Alicia. I'm a resident of Indian Trail, and I have kids in elementary school. I feel like voting on the mask topic right now is premature because we don't know where the state will require. Going against CDC recommendations is not a professional look, and nor does it show that you have children's well-being first in your mind. A lot of you, as well as parents, are wanting mask choice. I do understand that masks are not well liked. I get that there are a lot of children with legitimate sensory and behavioral attributes that make mask wearing difficult or impossible. There are people with trauma where the mask covering a nose and a mouth can feel like a trigger for an emotional response. It is not black and white, and I'm not debating that. But what I am saying is that for this to be a true choice for all parents, masks should be optional in elementary schools after children under the age of 12 can be vaccinated, which should also be a choice. Because it is factual and not a debate, no matter how many unverified studies you bring up, masks mitigate the spread of respiratory viruses from the wearer. Therefore, by choosing not to wear one, you are taking away the choice of another child to attend the safe public school available to them by law. This obstacle is removed when the children have the opportunity to be vaccinated if they so choose. A vaccinated child is less at risk by an unvaccinated non-masker. We have been told that the vaccine should be available around September for this age group. Therefore, children will have the opportunity to be fully protected by December. Is that really so much to ask? 4 more months. And if the moral dilemma of placing children at risk against their will isn't enough, do we really have the budget for the high amount of lawsuits that will follow when children catch COVID at school because their peers aren't following CDC guidelines? Because I guarantee you, parents of infected children, myself included, will hold you accountable for the blood on your hands for not following recommendations. Also, do you have the budget for the compensatory services that will need to be provided for kids who can't come to school with unmasked and unvaccinated children? No virtual will be offered, so there will be no choice but to offer these services to at-risk children in their home. That is a lot of children who would otherwise be in school. Are you going to do this, or are you going to deny them the right to safe public education? This brings up my last point. those at-risk children. I am a nurse, and that covers a large amount of medically fragile children in our community, mostly Union County. These children are at higher risk of dying from COVID. If you vote for optional masking, these children will be forced to be exposed against their will when attending school because they are offered no choice. It is these children that I worry about more so than my own, and it is these children of why I'm here. And once again, these children will get the short end of the stick. The inequity is showing. Also, if you just hire that equity officer that was recommended, they could be handling all this in a way that keeps 100% of children the safest they can be. Please think about that. And since I have 22 seconds left, I hear people saying that kids are too young to be hearing about racism in school. And I feel like if a child is old enough to feel the effects of racism, then they're old enough to be taught about it. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Kathy Powers, and we need to start bringing more speakers into the room.
My name is Kathy Powers, and I'm a resident of Union County. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you again. Last month, I stood here and I spoke about masks, and I appreciate the board sending a resolution to the state asking for the removal of the mask requirement. I also thank you for the motion that was brought to the table to go mask optional for the next school year. Like most parents, I was disappointed that it failed. However, I understand the opposition's concerns. With that being said, I have to make a perfectly clear public prediction for the future. The masks are a segue for a vaccine requirement in schools. And if we are not successful in removing the mask from schools, we will fail on the vaccine issue also. Our children are being leveraged for when these injections are fully approved by the FDA. The government is going to see how far they can push us parents. So we need your support now. There is no one on God's earth who knows my children better than me and my husband. We know every look on their faces, scratch on their bodies. We know when they are really sick. We know when they pretend to be sick. We can look into their eyes and feel their pain as well as their joy. From the food they eat, to the clothes they wear, to the sports they play, and to the medicine we choose to give them or not give them. Our lives revolve around our children, and now politicians and school boards, because they refuse to stand up for us, want to swoop in and tell us what to do with our children. Force us to force them to put things onto and into their bodies that we, the parents, do not agree with or are just not ready for. Do you think that because the governor or CDC tells us that something is safe, that we just throw our hands up and say, okay, well, the governor says it's safe, so go ahead, have my children and their well-being and their future. We will not throw them to the wolves. The latest report from the ABC Science Collaborative, dated June 30th, 2021, stated that, quote, proper masking is the most effective mitigation strategy to prevent secondary transmission in schools when COVID-19 is circulating and when vaccination is unavailable or there is insufficient uptake. The problem with their analysis of the data was that there was no control group. Masked individuals were not compared to unmasked individuals in the same setting. And for anyone that understands basic scientific principles, without a control group, your experiment is null and void. The National Education Association, the so-called biggest teachers union in the country, also states, according to their website, I quote, our democracy will flourish only when we ensure every school is fully funded, every child is treated with dignity, and every learner can pursue their passion. Well, treating a child with dignity means allowing them to breathe the oxygen that they're entitled to as a human being. It is time to step up. I haven't received a response from Cooper or Cohen regarding my concerns, and according to my state senator, quote, I am not optimistic about a legislative solution. I've spoken to lawyers, and they can't help either because the government won't lift the self-imposed state of emergency.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Our next speaker is Justine Libby.
All kids are not eligible for the vaccine yet, and we haven't established herd immunity. Medically fragile kids won't have a virtual option, and this board wants to vote to make masks optional. Whether you like it or not, science supports that virus transmission is lowered when all parties mask properly. A vote to make masking optional is a vote against our medically fragile children. Why are you in a rush to make this decision? It's almost as if an election is around the corner. Switching gears to a history lesson, on June 10th, 2019, Travis Kiker, a school board member, posted several racist images on Facebook. Melissa Merrill pushed the like button on the posts. Travis submitted a resignation. Melissa did not. She called these posts insensitive, which no ma'am, they were racist, and suggested the formation of the Citizens Advisory Council to help further a better atmosphere. The council has presented its recommendations, but many board members are already planning to reject them. I know this because 3 board members are part of several fringe groups that are active on Facebook. Members of these groups post things, which I feel like I need a content warning here. Quote, diversity is no more than anti-white, still quoting. The U.S. was founded, quote, and built by white Christians, still quoting, and we will fight to keep it that way, end quote. Quote, a couple hundred of these teachers, still quoting, get hot tar and feathers, and I bet the rest fall in line, end quote. As Gary Sides himself said, quote, a lot of folks won't be happy with the BOE manner of addressing the CAC DEI recommendations, and some heads will explode when they hear my proposed anti-CRT policy change, end quote. I think he said something about hopping over those heads too, pretty triumphantly. My tax dollars paid for CAC. The board can no longer say that they don't know about the racism in the groups they support. After the CAC, you can no longer say that you don't know about the inequities and microaggressions faced by the UCPS community. Doing nothing now is a dereliction of duty. You are either on the board to further your fringe partisan ideas, or you are on the board to make this community better. You are all in the spotlight now. I hope you will look back at your recent history and decide it is time to do the right thing. Those of us who want all children, staff, and teachers to feel safe and supported in schools are not going to be quiet. We will not stop holding you accountable. If you cannot denounce these fringe groups and their horrible statements, you should resign. I ask that you vote to approve an equity officer for UCPS and that you follow their suggestions. And I'd like to know where I can collect my check for speaking tonight, because apparently we are paid. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Quinn Hargett. The next speaker is Lori Carter. The next speaker is Deb Helms.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you yet again. I don't know about you guys, but I'm tired. I know you have to be as well. I have stood here for the past 2 months begging for you to remove the masks from our children at school. And in the past month, I have spent precious time I should have been spending with my children outside enjoying our summer. I have been reading through Cooper's executive orders. Doesn't that sound fun? I was truly shocked to find that Executive Order 163 from September, Section 2.3A, clearly states, should not wear a face covering due to any medical or behavioral condition or disability, including but not limited to any person who has trouble breathing. And below the list of exceptions, the executive order clearly states, anyone who declines to wear a face covering for these reasons should not be required to produce documentation or any proof of a condition. These exceptions were reaffirmed with Executive Order 209 in April, as well as 220 in June. The governor has given us an ability to bypass the recommendations of the toolkit since September, probably due to the fact that it is against federal law to mandate medical devices that have not been approved by the FDA. Masks and vaccines have not been approved by the FDA. They are only being used under emergency use authorization. So by allowing these exceptions, Cooper has provided himself a blanket of protection against violating federal law. I have to ask, has our local school board provided themselves that same level of protection? My 6-year-old has been injured by mask wearing to the point that her ENT is now suggesting that she have surgery to close off one of the blood vessels in her nose because it has been damaged. So now as a mother, I'm finding myself faced with a choice. Do I start my child on a path in life to go against everything she has previously been taught to respect authority and have her stand up for herself against these unjust laws and just refuse to wear a mask? Or do I just completely remove her from the school system because that is not her burden to bear? We have to make masks optional unconditionally. There are already 2 states in this country who have made masks optional contingent upon vaccines. The North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services just last week is encouraging schools to consider doing COVID testing at school and offering additional funding for that. We cannot do that. Our children's health is not for sale. We have a doctor that handles our children's medical needs, and we send our children to school to get education, not medical treatment. The governor himself, in black and white, has given us the ability to send our children to school mask-free with an undocumented exception. Please bring that to the local level and allow our children that freedom, and don't make them have to stand and fight for their own rights at 6 years old. Counties close to us have done that in the past few days. It's time for us to say no to COVID testing, no to vaccine requirements, and yes to medical freedom. Thank you.
Rebecca Schoff. Allison Powers.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to talk about bias in education. It's a little bit different, though. Years ago, I was a lifeguard and taught swim lessons in Ohio. Every year, we volunteered in a program to give swim lessons to disadvantaged kids to help them learn to swim. Sadly, a number of minority children drowned every summer in Lake Erie, and we hated that it happened. I know I don't look it, but I'm old enough to remember when the Civil Rights Act was passed. There was blatant discrimination keeping minorities out of pools, and Black people were less likely to have swim lessons. So years ago, there was systemic racism and minorities not having swim lessons. Poverty was also an issue. My mother didn't know how to swim either, seeing as she grew up during the Depression. Today, it's great that there are Black swimmers on the U.S. Olympic team, including one of the team captains. However, back then, when the kids came for swimming lessons, we didn't talk about history or how many children drowned in Lake Erie. Looking at those eager little faces, well, you didn't want to discourage them at all. You want to teach them to swim and how to self-rescue. Telling them that history would be like tying a lead weight around their waist. But that is what critical race theory wants to do, to put a lead weight around the waist of all kids and sinking them. Everyone needs to be positive when it comes to learning. An example of how not being positive brings to mind a class I had in college. The professor's nickname was Flunking Freddy. I'm sure you all had one of those classes as well. It was a class in solid mechanics. He wrote a list on the board with all the reasons why we were to flunk his class. I dutifully wrote them all down, determined not to flunk due to any of those reasons. It took about half the semester for me to realize that the class was not that hard, and I did pass it, but to this day, I hate solid mechanics. Fluid mechanics, a tougher class, but with a wonderful teacher I loved. To conclude, children need lots of positivity to learn, and that's where the focus should be for their learning. There should be no imprinting on their minds of negativity from the past. And that's why I do not support critical race theory. Thank you.
Next is Richard Daunt.
Good evening. If 18 months ago someone had asked if we should force children to accept medical interventions, masks, vaccines, with no long-term safety data for a disease that barely affects them, they would have been laughed out of the room. But as a society, here we are today, considering doing exactly that, and not even with the pretense that it is for their own safety. It is because some adults think it is okay to force children to accept treatments which may cause them harm in order to protect us. Yet the adults clamoring for this have all been vaccinated already. As a parent, I feel it should be the other way around. We should be willing to sacrifice for the sake of our children. I know that many of you here today are concerned about complying with the law, but we have conflicting laws. We have a federal law which states that medical treatments or devices that have only received emergency approval must be optional. Then we have the governor's orders, which is in conflict with the federal law. As was said last meeting, the decisions are being made by one man, Cooper. This is not the way our government works. Our system of government was intended to be bottom up, not top down with orders and mandates that violate individual rights. In 1962, Holocaust organizer Adolf Eichmann's excuse for his role was that he was just following orders. Everything he did was perfectly legal according to the laws of Nazi Germany. The cruel laws, the evil laws. Soon after giving his excuse, he was hung. Why was that excuse not good enough? Because we are not robots. Because we're more than fancy animals. We have a God-given moral consciousness so we can discern right from wrong. Please do what you know is the right thing. Let's not get hung up on following the orders, the illegal orders, the cruel orders. Let's not subordinate our own morals to the orders. Leaders have the courage to make tough decisions. They choose what is right, even when it is hard. Choosing to be a proxy for the state is not leadership. It is the easy way out. Listen to your still small voice within. Defy these illegal orders. This community will have your back. Thank you for bringing forward the mask choice motion tonight. We know that the position you're in is not easy. Thank you.
The next speaker is Aaron Muldoon.
Good evening to the board and Dr. Houlihan. Just say no. That's what you'll hear from myself and many other parents regarding CRT. Critical race theory, cultural responsive teaching, culturally relative teaching, social emotional learning, whatever umbrella these topics fall under. Because we voice our opposition against CRT, there are some teachers in our Union County public school system who are doxing and threatening to call employers to try and destroy the lives of those that disagree. This is the very same group that marched on Dr. Houlihan's home with a coffin on their car while his children were present. So are we to entrust our children in the classrooms and expect them to be treated with no bias? We will not. One of these very same UCPS teachers from Cuthbertson High School on social media accused me of spearheading attacks on teachers. This is an outright lie. I have the right to guide my children's education, and I have exercised that right and will continue to do so. If this does not align with that teacher or hurts her feelings, I make no apologies. But that's okay, because I can tell you what's going to happen. The schools will be receiving hundreds of letters for the files of our students that would be required to be followed, and it is protected by the Constitution of the United States of America. As parents, guardians, we acknowledge we have the right to guide the upbringing and education of our children, and the Supreme Court has upheld this right. According to the U.S. Constitution, specifically the 14th Amendment, we are protected by our rights to religious spiritual freedom, and this federal law supersedes state law in regard to parental control over one's children. Under the law, requests cannot be denied. Parental rights are broadly protected by Supreme Court decisions, and especially in the area of education. The Supreme Court has repeatedly held that parents possess the fundamental right to direct the upbringing and education of their children. Furthermore, the court declared that the child is not a mere creature of the state. Those who nurture him and direct his destiny have the right, coupled with high duty, to recognize and prepare him for additional obligations. The Supreme Court criticized a state legislature for trying to interfere with the power of parents to control the education of their own. In Meyer, the Supreme Court held that the right of parents to raise their children free from unreasonable state interferences is one of the unwritten liberties protected by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. It is cardinal with us that the custody, care, and nurture of the child reside first in the parents, whose primary function and freedom include preparation for the obligations the state can neither supply nor hinder. These words are not empty. They are not open for interpretation. This will include curriculum, testing, vaccine, masks, questionnaires, surveys, and anything else as parents we deem as an infringement on our privacy and our duties as parents. We are not sitting down. We are not being quiet. We will not be told how to raise our children. And I reiterate that children are not mere creatures of the state. They are our gifts, our children, and we will make the decisions. And I will remind you all that government on all levels work for us. Thank you.
Next is Kristen Ames.
Good evening, Board. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and critical race theory is deeply intertwined. CRT is the ideology that a DEI officer would implement throughout UCPS. The only reason why you would need DEI is because you believe CRT is correct, that the country is racist. To be clear, I am not against diversity. However, I am against hiring, promoting, and accepting individuals based on their skin color, which is what your Citizens Advisory Committee called for and what a DEI officer would do. I am for equality of rights and opportunities, not for equity of outcomes. I don't want anyone excluded, including the white heterosexual Christian male, which is supposed to be at the top of the oppression pyramid, according to CRT. I know CRT very well. I know what it is, and I know what it does to children and adults. I was first introduced to CRT as a junior in high school in my American history class way back in 1992, almost 30 years ago. During one class period, I was told based solely on my skin color that my parents were racist and that I had privilege. Although I wanted to speak out and defend my parents and myself, I said nothing, along with the 60 other students present. I was too afraid of getting suspended or having my A that I earned taken away from me. I'm sure many other students feel the same. I've also read books that explain and promote CRT. I would like to now quote from 2 of these such books. Kendi states in his book, How to Be a Racist, that white power controls the United States. To love capitalism is to end up loving racism. Capitalism is essentially racist. Racism is essentially capitalist. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. Robin DiAngelo in White Fragility states, a positive white identity is an impossible goal. White identity is inherently racist. White people do not exist outside the system of white supremacy. I strive to be less white. To be less white is to be less racially oppressive. Anyone who states that CRT does not divide or that it does not seek to make victims out of Black students and oppressors out of white students is grossly misinformed. This is why when a white person does their work, they are expected to feel deep shame for sins committed by others long ago and are required to daily self-examine their own racism. These books and the ideology of CRT sees all things through a racial lens. CRT requires one to view all inequities between all groups as a problem as policy, never an individual's behavior. As Kendi states, there is no such thing as a racist or racist policy. Thank you.
Next is Leah Jordan, Pam Moore, April Edwards.
Good evening. My name is April Edwards. I am a Union County resident. I do have 2 children currently enrolled in Union County Public Schools, a rising 4th grader and a rising 6th grader. I also have a 2021 graduate of Union County Public Schools. I am here tonight to talk about critical race theory. Critical race theory is a Marxist ideology. Critical race theory puts Americans into categories of oppressed and oppressors, teaching that minorities are oppressed while white people, particularly white men, are the oppressors, therefore causing division and teaching racism. The North Carolina DPI, New Social Studies Standards on every grade level, leaves a lot of room for bias. Our classrooms should only consist of facts. No teacher should be allowed to teach their opinion. The school system's job is to teach math, science, and reading. My job, a parent's job, is to teach the life issues. Do not allow critical race theory to indoctrinate our babies. Do not allow critical race theory to teach racism. Don't tell one group based on their skin color that they are oppressed, and don't tell the other group that based on their skin color that they are the oppressors, which, by the way, is racist. Don't teach the victim mentality. Teach them all that they are in the land of opportunity, the United States of America. They can accomplish anything they put their minds to. Teach them that with hard work, determination, anything is possible. Teach them how to think, not what to think. Keep the bias out of our classrooms. Keep critical race theory out of our schools. In the words of Candace Owens, if you're looking for institutional racism, it exists within critical race theory. Ban it at every level. I'm going to leave you all with this tonight, Romans 16:17. I urge you, brothers and sisters, to watch out for those who cause divisions. Keep away from them. Thank you. Have a good night.
Our next speaker is Casey Ike. Did I say that correctly? Ike, okay.
My name is Casey, and I'm a Union County resident. I have 4 children in the Union County Public Schools. I grew up in Matthews, just over the border, and my husband and I chose to live in Matthews on this side of the county for a reason. We both have teaching backgrounds and are products of public school system, but because of recent events, I'm losing faith in that system. I was greatly disturbed by some of the comments that were made at the last meeting by the public. I feel the need to clear a few things up. No one is fighting against diversity, and we're not fighting against inclusion. There were a number of historical events that one speaker mentioned that she missed in her education here in UCPS. We're not against teaching those things either. But CRT is a worldview, a lens in which to look at all other things. It tells my children that because they're white, they're the oppressors, and their friends are oppressed based on skin color, something they can't even change. What about the children who come from families where they are adopted or fostered by parents of a different color? Children who have parents with 2 skin colors. Some of you say this is not being taught in schools, but yet parents are reporting it on a daily basis. This past year at our very own elementary school, children were assigned a book and were told to evaluate their whiteness. At a time when children needed their teachers more than ever, needed their comfort and their mentorship, they were made to feel guilty for something that they had no control over. So now on the way to school each day, I talk to my 7th grader, my 4th grader, my 2nd grader, and now my kindergartner. I have to tell them that they may not be able to trust their teachers anymore. They can't believe everything that they tell them. We personally have a biblical worldview at home. I don't expect that to be taught in school, but I don't want this worldview taught in my children's school either. All of my children thrive in their school environments. They love school and they love their teachers, but I cannot send them if you cannot guarantee to me that teachers won't teach this mindset. I'll never forget my 9th grade civics teacher on the first day of school. She told us that her job was to teach us the curriculum, but that if she did her job correctly, we would never know where she stood or what her beliefs were. And she did just that. Those are the teachers that we need in our schools, and those are the ones that deserve to be there, the ones that are not trying to insert their own biases and agendas. On another note, my 5-year-old is supposed to start in the dual language immersion program this year, just like his other 3 siblings. Can you imagine trying to learn another language with a mask over your face? Your teacher's voice and pronunciation muffled by a mask? It doesn't make any sense. Regardless of the foreign language, kinders and first graders need to see their teachers' mouths move for the simple reasons. They need to see their teachers' facial expressions and their smiles. So I'm asking for 2 things tonight. 1, that you would ban CRT, and 2, that you would once and for all vote masks optional for parents like us who want our children to be able to see their teachers' faces and to show them their sweet smiles. My 5-year-old has a good one. It will light up a room. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is James Townsend.
Good evening. My name is James Townsend. I live in Waxhaw. I got 4 kids in Union County Public Schools, 2 that already graduated. Critical race theory, as defined by Britannica, an intellectual movement and loosely organized framework for legal analysis based on the premise that race is not natural, biologically grounded feature of physically distinct subgroups of human beings, but a socially constructed or culturally invented category that is used to oppress and exploit people of color. Critical race theorists hold that law and legal institutions in the United States are inherently racist Insofar, they function to create and maintain a social, economic, and political inequalities between whites and non-whites, especially African Americans. So essentially between people of different colors. We should all agree that words and phrases like intellectual movement, loosely organized framework of legal analysis based on the premise and theorists hold, regardless of the subject, has no place to be taught, as a matter of fact, in our public school system. Simply the job of public schools, K through 12, is educate our children on things like math, science, factual history, reading, English, etc., so that our children can function in society as adults. It is not the role or responsibility for public schools or public school teachers to teach, promote, and grade students on theories, beliefs, opinions, morals, religions, politics, etc., or in this case, intellectual movements, loosely organized framework, and or legal analysis based on the premise, unless for no other reason to provide these types of opinions for reference only to maybe high school age students for analysis, debate, and critical thinking. Even though we should be all in agreement that teaching and promoting movements should not be taught to children as fact, let's dive into this definition a bit further. In part, it reads, race is not a natural biological grounded feature of physical distinct subgroups of human beings, but socially constructed or culturally invented category that is used to oppress and exploit people of color. I couldn't agree more, except for the part where it says that it's used to express and exploit people of color. Says who? The theorist? The people who theorize this? This is an opinion, and it goes on to read, critical race theorists hold that law and legal institutions in the United States are inherently racist insofar they function to create and maintain social, economic, and political inequalities between whites and non-whites, especially African American. This, too, is just a belief. I'm running out of time, so. Basically, how about this? We are hell-bent on promoting a movement. How about we have a movement we can call human race theory, a movement that promotes a curriculum enforcing that we are all the same underneath the color of our skin, that character in a person's action is more important than skin color, the premise of unconditional love for one another without any judgment or prejudice. Why don't we explain why any type of oppression or judgment based on the color of skin is wrong and end with that? Teach these kids equality, racism, not place blame on others by sitting back and judging themselves and others.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Patrick Ty, Sarah Hamilton.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm here to discuss masks again that are being forced on our children. It's extremely frustrating that we still have to talk about this, but here we go again. The COVID numbers for Union County have changed for the better in the past 2.5 months. Based on the most recent data collected from July 9th, Union County has seen a 76% decrease in the number of COVID cases, with only 19% increase in COVID vaccination rate. Since the release of school in May, there has been a 20% decrease in the number of cases and only a 6% vaccination rate. However, despite the large decrease in COVID cases, our governor and state health officials still want to mask our children. Since school ended, they have been playing with their friends, attending camps, indoors, mask-free. If children not wearing a mask had anything to do with the spread of COVID, the percentages stated above would increase, not decrease. Our children are not suffering from COVID. Our children are suffering from government overreach. On June 30th, the ABC Collaborative released a study on the effectiveness of mask wearing in schools. However, their study was completely one-sided and offered no comparison data to schools that did not require a mask. Dr. Danny Benjamin is the co-chair of the ABC Collaborative team. He is a professor of pediatrics and a member of the Duke Clinical Research Institute. He also works for the NIH for children and is part of the Pediatric Trials Network. Their motto reads, "Making drugs safer and more effective in the youngest patients." His job is to create drugs. It wouldn't benefit his work to remove masks from our children. We need to remove mask mandates, end our partnership with the ABC Collaborative, and allow our children to move on with their lives and education. Anyone who chooses to wear a mask should still have that option. We don't want to take away anyone's right to protect themselves, but we should also have equal rights to allow our children to receive a mask-free education without the physical and mental harm that masks can cause. I want my children to be able to go to school like all of us in this room were able to do. I want my kids to receive a solid education where teachers are not having to spend time monitoring proper mask wearing. I also want them to laugh and smile with their friends. No distance, no separation, no mask mandates. We need parents and grandparents allowed back in schools and classrooms. Please do what is right for our kids in this county and vote to end the mask mandate tonight. Lead by faith instead of fear. Thank you.
Michael Height. Thank you.
My name is Michael Height, and I am 14 years old. I was diagnosed with autism at 7 years old. School has always been very important to me for many reasons. The biggest reasons, though, are social experiences, structure, and my IEP. As a child growing up with autism, social expression cues are very important things I work on while in school. Mask and social distancing make that impossible. As a child growing up with autism, structure of my day, such as my normal school routine, is a very important thing that I cannot get well without being in school. Mask wearing makes it nearly impossible for me to focus and breathe. It disrupts my routines and makes it very hard for me to learn. As a child growing up with autism, my IEP has been so helpful in my learning career. Virtual school took away my help, my routine, and my friends. My doctor gave me a no mask note for school because the mask was disruptive and made me physically sick. My school superintendent and my principal, Dr. Patience, at Porter Ridge Middle School did not care about my doctor's medical advice or my health. Because of these reasons, my parents moved me to a new school outside of Union County. I love my new school. It is mask-free. My grades are better now, like they were before mask and virtual school. I'm getting my IEP help again, as I should have been all along. I'm not forced to stand alone by a wall and masked for recess. I can see my teacher smile. I can see my friends' smiles, and it makes me feel happier and better. All kids should have the freedom to choose to breathe freely, to be able to make friends, and have access to a free and fair education. I did not get this in Union County schools, nor have my brothers or my friends. Please remove the mask mandate. Make it optional for all staff and students. Thank you for listening and for your consideration.
Thank you, Michael, and I just hope that that one day you will come back to Union County Public Schools. I'm sad to hear that you had to leave us to go somewhere else, and you did a wonderful job tonight. Thank you so much for being here. We have 6 minutes left, so we're probably going to limit it to the next two people, Chris Day and Holly Tartaglia.
Hi, Chris Day from Waxhaw. First, I want to thank you all for voting for the resolution in the prior meeting, calling on Governor Cooper to end the mask mandate. It was important to get everyone on the record that that's how we feel here, that we don't want masks regardless of vaccine status. Unfortunately, you were all essentially blown off by Governor Cooper's office. So now we stand in a position where there have been no rules put forth by the state yet, and a gap in which to act and get ourselves more on the record. There have been concerns expressed by board members, particularly and members of the public, about getting ahead of regulations, getting ahead of the state, standing up and being the ones that say we're going to go mask optional. But really, what is the risk of that? You could join other districts and make masks optional, and then there's several districts doing it, and that could push the state to change their policy. It could push Governor Cooper to decide he doesn't want to fight all these individual districts. So then, therefore, you've got the chance to implement what you all believe should be done by taking action. If he does then mandate it, he may just be afraid to do anything to disobeying districts because he can't afford the political fight. He doesn't have a majority in the legislature. He may just let it happen and put his mandate out and not enforce any punishments. And in the worst case, he comes out with some terrible, just intense punishment for the district, some sort of yanking of all our funding or something. Well, in that case, if you have to take it back and do what's best for the district at that time under that set of circumstances, take it back and follow the rules then. But what's lost by trying to make it optional now? Nothing. There's no rule preventing it. We could do it, and we could change our mind if we have to, if it's that bad. But the odds are it won't be. It may be what makes Governor Cooper decide not to make masks required for next year. Finally, you just heard from a former student. You heard from prior speaker. There's a procedure for students to medically exempt themselves and for parents to medically exempt students in the last Executive Order 209. There is no procedure, however, in Union County to make sure that is done on a universal basis. You were not allowed to ask for proof of medical condition under the Executive Order, and we're not allowed to have any sort of system by which it's questioned. And you just heard from a student who was rejected from wearing a mask with a doctor's note, who's not even required to provide. You're not even allowed to ask for a doctor's note under the Executive Order. And he was now in a different school because he wouldn't even believe his doctor's note. If, for some reason, despite the lack of risk, the board decides that there's not enough people on the board who are in favor of actually going ahead of the governor, the next resolution to be passed should be to create a pathway and a process by which to ensure that medical exemptions claimed by parents for their students under Executive Order 209 as delineated are accepted in a formal way through a centralized process. And that way, when kids come in and their parents say he qualifies or she qualifies under exemption A, B, or C, in section 2.6, I think it is, of Executive Order 209, they are not rejected by a random person in the chain of events. They follow school policy. However, I think that you guys can get the mask option without even having to worry about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker for tonight is Holly Tartaglia.
I do want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I wasn't sure if I was going to get to. I'm a little nervous. I am a Union County parent. I've had 3 children go through UCPS schools. One is still there. I'm also a UCPS teacher. I came back to the classroom after 22 plus years being out of the classroom because I love UCPS schools. I was subbing and came to work last year during the terrible COVID year. I do want to say I am part of the Moms for Liberty group on Facebook, and the person that was cited for making terrible comments was removed as soon as the administration was notified. So I do want to say that just in their defense. I do want to talk to you tonight about the masks. I teach first grade, teaching through a mask, how to teach a child to read, how to teach a child to sound out letters and digraphs and those kinds of things is almost impossible. And I feel like the long-term effects of the literacy, the long-term effects in literacy will be big. And we're already behind. We're already behind because of last year. And so I just say this to you, there are options for those who are worried about virus. They're worried about, they can get the vaccine, they can have their children vaccinated, they can wear a mask, but it needs to be optional. I do know there are several parents whose children are not in school because they don't want them to wear a mask all day. So we have that side of the argument as well. Okay, so children are the children that I teach first grade, they're the lowest risk group, okay? And so I feel like the data supports that we don't need to have the masks, but I feel like this should be optional for those who want them. During the curriculum meeting, last curriculum meeting, there were concerns raised about CRT, about teachers using things off the internet to be able to supplement in their classroom. I do want to challenge each of you to take time to go to the Union County Content Resources page and look at what you have offered to us to teach. Because as a first year teacher this year, after being out of the classroom so long and having to teach science to first graders, you should look at that before you limit the teacher's resources. I think those things, those resources should be available to all the parents. They should be able to access those pages and see them. And I do support publishing our lesson plans so that parents can see what is being taught in schools. It's not my job to teach values of a political system. I need to teach children how to read and how to do math and science and those kinds of things. I do not need to be teaching a political system's values. So that's my stand on that. But thank you for the opportunity to speak. I love UCPS schools. That's why I decided to come back to teaching. So share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. We have about 8 or 9 more speakers that were here to speak, and I do apologize, but our policy to expire at 60 minutes maximum. We have reached that point, and we're going to have to move forward. Any person that was not able to speak tonight, please email the board, the superintendent, and I promise you we will read your email. Board, that brings us to open session meeting minutes for June 1st, June 14th, and June 30th.
Motion to approve the June 1st, 14th, and 30th minutes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. That brings us to the consent agenda.
Approval, motion to approve the consent agenda.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. And we go straight into the superintendent's report. I turn it over to Dr. Houlihan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me begin this evening with a few brief comments. First, I want to say a big congratulations to our student speller extraordinaire, Shrethan Gajula, for being a finalist in the Scripps National Spelling Bee this year. This is a tremendous honor, and until now, I certainly have never been associated or familiar with any of our students that have made it that far in the spelling bee. You did a fantastic job. You represented Union County Public Schools very well, and also North Carolina with a very positive attitude and great character. So tonight, we want to give you a huge shout out. Congratulations and best wishes as you begin high school at Marvin Ridge next year. Second, we have concluded, which seems like a long year of athletic accomplishments. We recently concluded our spring athletics. Congratulations to the girls' track teams at Cuthbertson, Weddington, and Marvin Ridge, boys' track teams at Cuthbertson and Weddington, the wrestling teams at Piedmont and Cata, and the women's tennis teams at Marvin Ridge. You all had tremendous championship level, amazing records. Congratulations to these teams and to the individual students, athletes who won individual awards. And finally, yesterday we kicked off session 2 of our summer learning camp. I want to thank our site administrators, teachers, support staff, and students. You're doing a phenomenal job staying engaged with us during the summer. I have visited a number of camps and have been super impressed with our turnout and how our teachers are making learning extremely fun for our students this summer. Keep pushing. We have a few more weeks to go. Summer Learning Camp, as a reminder, ends Thursday, July 29th. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Very welcome. So that brings us to an amendment. The board has would like to discuss Dr. Houlihan's contract that is currently set to expire in 2023. I want to say to the public and remind this board that that Dr. Houlihan joined us in 2016, and since 2016, our board did extend his contract a while back, but now we have some room to make a decision. So I'm going to turn it over to our vice chair, Ms. Kathy Heintel.
I'd like to make a motion to extend Dr. Houlihan's contract to June 30th of 2025 and increase his salary by $20,000. He has not had a raise by this board since he was hired in 2016.
Second, enthusiastically.
Okay, are there any comments to Dr. Houlihan or comments from the board? Any questions?
I would just like to commend Dr. Houlihan and the entire staff with the most difficult of years. I don't think if you told us 2 years ago that you're going to have school closed down and then come back partial days, kids wearing masks, and the whole world turned upside down, they would have said you were crazy. But here we are. We're trying to our best to move forward and looking forward. I am anyway. And I know my son is looking forward to the new school year next month. And I appreciate all the hard work our staff has done getting through the most difficult of times. Well deserved.
Thank you. Yep.
And I will just say this one comment. It has been a pleasure to have you join us from Houston, Texas, and bring your family to Union County in 2016. It's been an honor to work with you on this board. And I had a county commissioner call me last year during COVID, and he asked me how much money we were saving since the kids were in school 5 days a week. And I reminded him that our buses were rolling 5 days a week, but our students could only be in class 2 days at a time, and that we had to roll through the alphabet. And so I had to explain that schools were open effective August 17th. And I told them that we just might need more money because we were running 3 school districts. We were running a school district on Plan A, a school district on Plan B, and a school district K through 12 all virtual. And so we were operating on one school budget and running 3 school systems. And that is because of the efforts of your leadership, your commitment to our students, where overwhelmingly over 82% chose to be in person. And for the few that felt safer at home, you and your team, Dr. Breedlove, who is here with us, your entire cabinet staff, honored those wishes as well and created overnight, I don't know how you do it, overnight a K through 12 virtual academy. And you did it with grace and professionalism, and at every turn, you kept our students first. And so I just want to say thank you. And on behalf of this board, by law, we can only extend your contract through 2025, but we have had discussions to keep you here through 2030 and longer if you'll stay.
Here, here.
So next, I'm also going to turn it over to Mrs. Heintel.
There was a motion and a second.
Oh, okay. So motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? 9-0.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, I will turn it over to Mrs. Heintel to address cabinet staff.
So for all the things that happened this last year, Dr. Houlihan did a great job at his cabinet staff as well. So I would like to make a motion for the 7 members of Dr. Houlihan's cabinet staff. That's Mrs. Morris, Dr. Breedlove, Dr. Harris, Mr. McCraw, Ms. McLam, Mr. Parker, and Ms. Dahlbert. That we extend all their contracts to June 30th of 2025 and increase their salaries by $7,500. And again, and again, they have not gotten raises again since 16 from this board.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Thank you, staff. This cabinet staff, this motion passes 9-0. We are very honored to work with each and every one of you. And thank you for everything you've done for us over, especially the past year and all the years before now. But you are an amazing team UCPS to work with. So that brings us to the SPIT committee. I'm going to turn it over to Matt Helms.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The SPTT committee met on June 23rd, and after a discussion, a motion passed 3-1 in the SPTT to recommend to the full board that wearing a mask be optional for all staff and students on all campuses beginning August 1st, 2021. This recommendation comes from SPIT or SPTT and does not need a second.
I have a quick question. That includes all transportation of any kind, yellow buses, white buses, athletics, extracurricular, anything.
Anything.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and as you said, it does not require a second because it came out of committee 3-1. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes to make mask optional effective August 1st, 9-0. That brings us to the CAC diversity presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Merrill, and thank you, Board. Tonight, our cabinet staff and I are pleased to provide the Board of Education with an update on our preliminary analysis and unpacking of the CAC Diversity Report, which was received by staff this past May. Throughout the past 2 months, we have taken the time to review the report that was presented to the Board, along with the recommendations associated with the report. And we have tried to complete a high-level analysis of what was shared by that committee in April. As you will hear this evening, we will discuss the recommendations presented by the CAC for Diversity. We would like to provide some clarity on some of the work that has already been happening within each of those recommendations and share areas in which we believe we should further explore. In addition, while we will not go into detail on every single aspect of the recommendations from the CAC for Diversity, we will review those that we feel are the most pertinent to this initial analysis. And we will share a series of possible actions from staff. And finally, we believe that this work must be collaborative in nature and cross-functional amongst our team. To that end, we have multiple cabinet staff members that will run through this report with you. All of us will be available at the end to answer any questions you may have. We do have a bit of a lengthy presentation. I apologize for that. It's a lot to go through, but we will move through the information expeditiously. So we're going to start this evening with Dr. Breedlove. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, before Dr. Breedlove begins what I know is going to be his excellent analysis, Dr. Houlihan, when you said that you won't go into great detail and all, I can just hear voices out there quoting you saying they didn't even go into great detail. Can you just elaborate a little bit? That is not that you won't cover it, but the amount of detail that it would take to dissect it in such a way would take a long time. Can you just make that plain so that people know that you're not covering, there's nothing being hid, and they're giving a full briefing of what was analyzed?
Yes, sir. And I think you just hit the nail on the head. This is a briefing. This is a 30,000-foot first step of unpacking what the CAC for Diversity recommended. If you look at that report, there were many line items and then sub-bullets associated, and many of those sub-bullets can be perceived as being repetitive. And so we're tackling the high-level bullets first, not everything within it, if that makes sense, just as our initial analysis. I hope that helps.
It does help, and I hope that the folks heard what he said. Everything is being looked at. Nothing is being covered up.
That is correct. Thank you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Houlihan. Thank you, Board. The way I'll start out is on these slides, what you're going to see initially is at the top is going to be the CAC Diversity's recommendation 1, 2, 3, and 4. Of course, number 1, I will start off with is the improvement of the student experience. On the left-hand side of the slide, you will see the CAC Diversity's recommendation, one of their bullets. And then on the right-hand side, you will see the staff analysis and the work that we did in unpacking the CAC Diversity's recommendation. Then in the following slide, after we address the staff analysis, we will then jump into taking a look at additional recommendations and moving forward with that. So we'll start with this slide and Diversity Recommendation 1, improving the student experience. And you can see here the CAC Diversity's first recommendation under the improvement of student experiences and incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations to address issues. When unpacking this, the staff analysis is that, well, first of all, we need to define the terminology a little bit more and work in that work and moving forward. So, and taking a look at that bullet and going to the next slide here, you will see a recommendation is to convene a group of stakeholders. And you can see that is principals, teachers, parents, and students, and work to define what diversity, equity, and inclusion means in Union County and Union County Public Schools, so that we all have a common definition in moving forward, because those terms are used a lot. And what we agreed on is that all of us have different definitions of that. And so we want a common definition that we can work from. And so that's the first starting point recommendation. And going to, of course, we begin that work this summer, and that will carry into the fall as we make that rounds working with our stakeholders to develop these common definitions for Union County Public Schools. Going into the second portion of recommendation 1, improving the student experiences, you can see the CAC Diversity's recommendation is to create high school programming to address issues at school level in order to provide an opportunity for students to share and understand the real world experiences of their peers. Once again, looking at what their request was, what the recommendation was, we need to look at the terminology once again and define that and get some additional feedback when it comes to things like programming. What does that really mean? Are we talking coursework for credit, or are we talking more holistic programming, co-curricular programming? So that just nailing down some of those additional items there. We also take a look at, as we unpack this, is what is Union County Public Schools currently doing? And are there things that we are doing that we can build from, even expand? And so the group looked at focus on implementing effective practices with establishing positive culture and climate, as we've worked through that over the last 4 years. Specifically, if you look at our EPIC schools, they did some work with the Safe and Civil Schools group, specifically foundations training, which is a proactive approach to building positive culture school-wide in the building. And that was done with our EPIC schools as an example of that. Going into the recommendations, after the discussion and unpacking of that bullet, we would like to convene recommendations to convene principals, teachers, and students to further explore high school programming and opportunities, and then identify and expand best practices for improving school culture and climate for all students. Similar to the work that is done with the foundations training that the EPIC schools have. Maybe we can expand that opportunity to all schools, not just the EPIC schools. All right, moving further along into recommendation 1, CAC Diversity's recommendation is interventions, educational opportunities for student infractions, right, to increase cultural competence. Educate students and staff on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And specifically, the CAC Diversity recommendation, an example was restorative practices, training and implementation. Working with the group brought up, okay, what are some of the things that we've done with this recommendation that we've done in Union County Public Schools? We talked about the training offered on effective school and classroom management procedures. Once again, in our EPIC schools with the CHAMPS training, also with discipline in the secondary schools. Our EPIC schools went through a lot of that training, was very successful, and we saw great success from that. And that could be an example of something that we need to expand across Union County Public Schools. That was part of the discussion. These same practices, services, and professional development should be evaluated and perhaps expanded. Once again, looking further into Union County Public Schools, looking at our own board policy and what we have there. Board Policy 4-3 was revised on May the 5th, 2020 to include current restorative practices within our discipline policies. These are proactive approaches for positive and engaging school cultures, working with students on student discipline rather than just going straight to suspensions. So a lot of that work was already put into our board policy. Going into the recommendations and actions based on that conversation and work, expanding school classroom management, professional development to additional schools, such as the CHAMPS training or discipline in the secondary schools. Also, making sure that we are identifying and then communicating what are the available interventions, services, and resources for our students and staff. Creating a district and school comprehensive communication plan around these efforts, and then expanding staff training opportunities. Once again, working this fall and into the spring of 2022 on that particular item. And then going into the last recommendation by the CAC Diversity Committee on recommendation 1, improving student experiences. You can see this bullet, and it expands 3 slides here, is equip teachers with social emotional learning. Once again, when you look at that bullet, we do know that we need to define and that terminology a little bit further and what that means to equip teachers. And that's just going through dialogue and getting some of that feedback so we have a better understanding there. Also, during the past 4 years, we look at, like we've done before on the other bullets, looking at what we are doing and looking for gaps in order for us to improve. Strategic efforts have been made to enhance SEL, personnel resources, and training across clusters. And you can see examples on the next slide that the staff looked at that we are currently doing and what has taken place in Union County Public Schools over the last 4 years. Union County Collaborative with the Union County Department of Health and Human Services. The work there to increase school psychologists, the work to increase social workers within our school system. We've also added additional high school counselors to lower that student to counselor ratio. We've developed and we're able to hire on lead middle and high school counselors. Expansion of Leader in Me, which as you all know, talks about the 7 habits of highly effective students. Positive behavior intervention and support, as you probably heard the acronym PBIS, is within Union County Public Schools. And then, of course, in all of our schools is the multi-tier system of support, or MTSS, that we work with. Intervention strategies to support our students through a tiered strategy. And what's not on here, and it just added this lately, is the Legends Grant that we have and the culture coaches that we were able to place throughout many of our middle and high schools across the district. Going a little bit further into the staff and analysis, further enhancement of communication and expansion should be considered as needed in this area. Additional resources, training should also be explored specifically for school-based staff not positioned within the counseling or mental health area. Talk about teachers, talk about teachers' assistants and getting them better trained to address SEL needs within our school system. And so the recommendation coming out of that work around recommendation 1 by the CAC Diversity on SEL is conduct a staff. We would like to see a staff survey to assess, to do a needs assessment across our school district in this area. What are the needs of our staff and better addressing SEL? Continue to enhance the work of student support services and the partnership with the Union County Collaborative with the Department of Health and Human Services. Also continue our work with our Human Resources Department and pertinent partners to provide support, training, and resources to our staff in this area. And then as always, you can see it in bold is the ongoing efforts that we have to continue our partnerships that are currently in place, committed to our students and staff and supporting the resource distribution and availability across all schools to all students. And so that ends the recommendation 1 by the CAC Diversity and some of our work that was done at the district level and unpacking this. And so we'll move on to recommendation 2, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Harris.
Yeah, do we want to get questions prior to the next speaker?
I was just asking Ms. Merrill, our hope was to go ahead and present the information all the way through and then take questions at the end. If the board would like to take questions at the end of each of the 4 sections, we can do that. It's totally up to you all.
I will defer to the chair.
I recommend moving on to the committee's recommendation number 2, unless you have questions on what was just presented for student experience, or just move on to and let Dr. Harris speak, and we can ask questions at the end.
All right, I'll write it down.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
Dr.
much.
Harris.
No problem. Thank you very much. Recommendation number 2 deals with diversity, equity, and inclusion, hiring, staffing, and training. As you can see, the first recommendation from CAC was hire a senior level chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, internal new hire, and create an office of equity. Union County Public Schools staff analysis. The internal review of existing positions should be considered for district level ownership. Efforts must be cross-functional between and amongst schools and departments.
I want to just add one comment on this very quickly. You've heard a lot of individuals through email and public comment kind of ask about this particular piece. We collectively as a team feel like, number one, we have a rock solid team in place with our central services that as a first step before considering hiring anyone new or externally or creating a new department, should first look within our team internally to determine ownership of this work. And secondly, I've seen too many school systems create a separate, unique department to be assigned to this work, and nothing really progresses because of working in isolation. And our staff believe that this should be more of a collaborative approach that is cross-functional amongst staff between departments and individuals on staff. So just wanted to further elaborate on that. Go ahead, Dr. Harris.
Thank you. The next recommendation was continue the CAC Diversity Committee, which is a combination of Union County Public School employees, students, parents, and community members. Also, expand human resources hiring, recruiting efforts for a diverse staff. Yep. The Union County Public Schools analysis. The Board of Education dissolved the CAC Diversity Committee in April following their final presentation. The report was turned over to staff for next steps. During the past 4 years, Union County Public Schools has made efforts to recruit, hire, and retain a diverse workforce. And finally, we're going to our recommendations. Review existing positions and department structures to best support ownership of workflow. Develop a student support advisory council for the purpose of collecting and gathering stakeholder feedback. Continue online training modules to expand and explore training options for staff and Board of Education. And analyze staff recruitment efforts and revise recruitment plans based on results and data.
And just to comment on the third bullet on that, one of the items that we do feel like we should explore is some kind of training for all of our employees. However, before we determine exactly which entity should come in to Union County Public Schools to deliver that training, our thought was that it might be beneficial for our entire cabinet staff, myself, and board collectively to go through a series of trainings first with multiple partners on these topics and subjects to then better determine which approach is best fitted for Union County and Union County Public Schools. So we would like to advance some kind of training for staff, but we really want to consider and have further discussion with the board past this presentation on the board's willingness and agreement to work with cabinet staff, which I'm sure you will, I know you will, and to go through some training with us to then kind of vet all the multiple partners that might be out there that could deliver that for the entire school system as a first step.
Thank you very much. That was recommendation number 2.
Good evening, members of the board. I've got recommendation number 3, which is policy change, drive systemic change, and address policy through an equitable lens. The first of the CAC diversity recommendations is to incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion values in UCPS vision and mission statement and ensure high accountability for administrators, faculty, and staff. Currently, the board has policy which addresses these values. Specifically, we look at board policy 1-21, statement on non-discrimination. And this policy, it sets forth the legal prohibitions, the standards that discrimination cannot occur based on race, religion, national or ethnic origin, color, age, military service, disability, or gender. We also have policy 3-7, which is prohibition against racism, unlawful discrimination, harassment, and bullying for employees. And then there's a companion policy 4-7 for students. And in this policy, it states the board expressly prohibits racism, unlawful discrimination, harassment, or bullying. And then it goes on a variety of reasons: race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, gender, socioeconomic status, academic status, gender identity, physical appearance, sexual orientation, or mental, physical, developmental, or sensory disability, or by association with anyone who is perceived to have one of these characteristics. So the board already has policy which identifies these values and holds them dear. The recommendations, the current strategic plan expires in 2022. So at that time, we can take these initiatives and strategies and then align them and align that strategic plan to these recommendations. The second one of the other issues was about the report card. Now, we don't establish what's in the state report card that's set for us. And so we are going to look at what other districts communicate and how they communicate other indicators. Okay, the next one is to create policy to hold staff, faculty, staff, and administration accountable for upholding the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion diversity training requirement with a number of hours. Right now, our policies are all available online for anyone to review through the board district page, and those policies that I mentioned are there. Additionally, staff are expected to review specific policies, including those that I mentioned, annually. Many policies are forwarded to all of our employees every year through our Safe Schools platform. And what happens is an email goes out with a link, and staff have to go through and review those policies. And that Safe School platform, as staff can tell you, will keep sending you emails until you complete that training. And then what we do internally is we go through and run reports for department heads and principals that says, okay, Michelle has completed this training, Susie has not. So that principals then can go back to their staff and department heads and say, Susie, you still have these training modules to complete. So that we ensure accountability, that staff understand these. Also, when new policies are adopted by the board or policies are reviewed by the board and revised, principals and department heads all receive a notification of that so they can pass it on to their staff. Next slide, please, Tyra. Thank you. So what we're going to do in the recommended timeline is to continue communicating existing policies to ensure staff are trained. Board policy right now requires an annual review of policy. Every single policy has to be touched every year by my office, and I do that personally. And when I see changes based on statutory changes, policy changes from the state, things that stakeholders have complained about, issues that have arisen, I bring those to the policy committee with recommended revisions, and then that all comes to the board. So we'll continue those and that practice. And then we'll continue to evaluate the alignment between our policies, our professional development, and then the appropriate implementation. I think some of this is implementation as opposed to actually the lack of existing policies. And all of mine are going to start in the fall and will obviously be ongoing because of the nature of them. Okay, the last of these is zero tolerance of discriminatory behavior for faculty and administration. Currently, we have policy 3-2A, which is the Employee Code of Conduct, Ethics, and Standards of Conduct. And so when there's a violation that's reported, it's investigated, and any substantiated violations are addressed by staff. But we need to ensure that people know how to report those, who to report them to, and then we need to calibrate at the school and department level to make sure things are equitable across the district. So moving forward, we're going to do an internal review
of our processes for reporting things under the Code of Ethics. We need to ensure that staff knows where to go and who to go to. We're going to continue the work of HR with our partners to provide support, training, and resources to our staff. We're going to survey staff to identify what are we doing good and where do we have gaps and what do we need to fix. And then, and perhaps most importantly, is we're going to work with our and people who do the investigation, people who get the reports of these violations, on how to close that loop. Having those communications with stakeholders so that they know that we've taken their concerns seriously, we've investigated, and we've taken appropriate action. State and federal law prevents us from, at times, explaining what decisions were made due to privacy concerns, but we need to make sure that folks know we've taken it seriously and that we've handled it. So that is the end of mine. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess I'm batting cleanup. So I'm recommendation number 4, resource distribution and offer equitable opportunities for all. So the first CAC recommendation was to address inequities between East and West and school clusters. During the past 4 years, we have made significant efforts to establish and ensure that all schools and students receive resources and services in an equitable manner. We will continue to refine those formulas as we move through. One of the next recommendation that they made under the same category was to address quality of resources and facilities divided between the East and West Side schools. Annually, you as a board commit to funding improvements on the capital plans and needs assessments across all clusters. We have a CIP plan that we go through annually that you all review those needs. On the next slide, to continue to address and the staff analysis on that same bullet. During the past years, we've done considerable analysis on any new construction needs. We've got recommendations that you all are working on to the county commissioners. We currently have funding for the design and architecture of the projects at Forest Hills and East Elementary that have been approved, and then other plans to address other aging facilities where needed, approved by the BOE. The recommendations under this, many of the actions associated with these recommendations can be condensed in the communication that Dr. Breedlove discussed in one of the previous slides under improving student experience. We can continue to provide those equitable funding-based formulas and based on those data, on the data and needs. And developing a digital dashboard that hopefully some of our new software will be able to provide some additional data that we can provide information on our website that's the public and staff can go to and review. This will be something we continue to do on an ongoing basis beginning in the fall of this year. Recommendation, the next recommendation is transparency about district-sponsored resources, PTOs, and data information. The staff analysis on this is work with school staff to expand communication with parents and opportunities to get involved in school events and activities. We know there are some schools that have more parent participation than others. So the staff recommendation or the recommendation and action timeline on this is to enhance and expand school-to-school partnership initiatives and align with our current strategic plan, work with school leaders to expand those parent engagement opportunities and provide more opportunities for parents in middle and high school age kids to engage in conversations with high school-based staff regarding their child's 4-year high school pathway interest and goals. That's something we'll begin the fall of this year, and efforts will continue and be ongoing. The next recommendation from the CAC was to provide more support and resources for ESL families. This is another one of those areas where we're going to need some clarification on what those support needs are and then what is necessary. The recommendation on this is, again, to explore and clarify these needs for ESL students and families at the district and school levels. So we'll continue those. Those will be a fall and ongoing efforts. Next CAC recommendation was promotion and marketing to all high-performing students. Currently, staff strategies include our school choice application that we post every year. We have a high school expo, promotion of career and college readiness scholarship opportunities that we currently are current efforts that the district does. We're going to look to expand those efforts and make sure we have communication opportunities to all students, identifying other best practices in other school systems that we might be able to utilize. Next recommendation from the CAC is to educate parents about opportunities within the district for the IB programs and advanced placement. In the fall of 2017, all of our high schools had to provide at least a minimum of 10 face-to-face AP classes in addition to virtual. In 2018, in the fall of 2018, along with the same bullet, the IB pathways for rising 9th and 10th grade students were offered as a strategy to recruit students from across UCPS. We will continue to evaluate these efforts and future and explore any additional IB program. Okay, gate sharing for athletics to provide more UCPS support for field maintenance. Staff analysis, we would like to explore maybe sharing resources for facilities use as opposed to athletics. That would be something that would be a policy decision from the Board of Education for something for us to bring back to you for consideration. So recommendations would be to evaluate the degree in which schools can enhance AP and IB offerings to help support staffing and student interest, explore opening the IB program maybe at a central countywide centralized location, discuss policies to maybe change the facility use agreements. These are things we would start looking at in the fall of this year and would continue to be ongoing efforts. Next recommendation, establish mentoring programs for all students. Currently, we do have some current mentoring programs for students. We can explore enhancements and expansions and other creation of new opportunities. Staff recommendations would be to audit existing mentoring opportunities and identify gaps and streamline, expand best practices of programs. That will be followed this year and ongoing efforts. That's the last recommendation. So I guess it's now open for questions.
Thank you, team. Appreciate it.
Okay, is it question time, Madam Chair? I had Mr. Breedlove, but I guess he can speak and he can stand there, but all presenters. And here's a question that kept coming through my mind as the presentation was going forward. As a member of the NAACP for here in Union County, I know that they were looking forward to this night, as many citizens were, and they're wanting to, in the NAAC's view, make sure there's a bang for the buck. So my question is, was there anything the CAC presented that was not part of what UCPS was doing? In other words, their recommendations, were they given and you all had not ever addressed any of those? Was there any new ones that came to light that they presented that you could sink your teeth into to say to the CAC, that was fresh, that was new, we can look at that, we can analyze that? Was there anything that was not part? Because as you had that mirroring going on, it seemed as though for every recommendation that was listed, there was some things that was already long-term in effect that Team UCPS was doing. Did you all find where there was, of those recommendations, something that you weren't doing?
I'll be glad to speak first.
Yes, sir.
I can think of 3 examples of recommendations that the CAC gave to the board and then the administration that we had not considered in full. Number 1, as Dr. Breedlove mentioned, the term high school programming. That is one that, while Dr. Breedlove said we need to gather some more feedback on how we define what that means. Is that extracurricular? Is that co-curricular? Is that coursework? There's a lot to unpack with that terminology. but that is not one that pertaining to this subject that we have had discussions about. Number two that was mentioned is the identification and work around staff and board training. That is a recommendation that was presented as part of this work that we agreed collectively that if we're going to do any training of our employees, that we would recommend the board and leadership and cabinet go through that first. The third one is the analysis of the needs of our English as a second language department. Our English as a second language students is one of the fastest growing populations in the county. While we have discussed obviously the needs of providing resources to schools based on what students need, as of today, we have not collectively reviewed in thorough detail what the ESL department might need to be more successful and or what our ESL students need to be more successful above and beyond what we currently allocate to schools. Those are three that we felt as a staff were spot on, that we should be reviewing this work and exploring how to improve upon those.
Now, with the answer to that question, because I know they're listening, what do you see as a timeline, reasonable timeline for not necessarily bring to the board to get voted on for implementation, but at least to begin the diving in process, to begin to do something with, just taking those three to do something with?
As you heard and saw this evening, a lot of the terminology on the timeline, we referred to ongoing, because I think we're still trying to figure that piece out. As you've heard Ms. Merrill say in other meetings, part of this work will have to go back through committee for further board discussion, further board approval, and then come back to the full board. Take your ESL piece as an example. That's all budgetary. So if we need to expand anything, that would be part of the budget conversations we have either definitely at finance, perhaps even at curriculum. And then that will funnel back through the board governance structure of then coming back to the full board. So when we say we're beginning this work in the fall of 21, it is ongoing. And our goal, our hope is to time that with whatever actions the board would need to take for any kinds of approval for something new or addition in future years.
And I hope that the citizens that are viewing this meeting tonight see that when we, the board, sent it back to staff, that staff took it seriously and has really produced a working, I will consider a working product for Team UCPS to work on. And I want to commend you and staff for a great job in the beginning process of this. We're nowhere near completion, but there is a process that has now been established, and we appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair, for this space.
Yes, any other questions?
I have a question. I have quite a few questions. From the recommendations that were given from the Diversity Committee and what you all have proposed, is there any way that a conversation can be had with the Diversity Committee to get their feedback from the work that they've done and try to figure out a way to continue working together and not allowing them to feel as though their work was in vain?
If that's a recommendation, a suggestion, I don't mind having those additional conversations at all. I think that what I would advocate for is a representative group. When the CAC for Diversity presented to the board, they had 3 or 4 individuals. It wasn't all members of the committee. So convening the entire committee to meet with me and or staff is not something I would recommend at the time. But if there are representatives that wanted to go through this with us, have further dialogue, listen, we're all part of this school system. So any time that we can collaborate, I'm going to always offer that. So the short answer is yes. How we get there is something that I would need to think through.
That was actually going to be one of my suggestions. I saw a couple times up on the recommendations to actually convene another group of people from the public. And would our former members of the CAC on diversity be kind of given the first opportunity to participate, right? They've already been along for a little bit of a ride, so it seems to make sense they could continue that journey.
Sure. I mean, and I have, as Dr. Breedlove mentioned, 4 existing structures already in place: a student advisory council, a teacher advisory council, a parent advisory council, and a principal advisory council. Any member that has been on the CAC for diversity that wants to submit their name to become part of those groups is certainly eligible to do. Especially, in my opinion, one of the groups that I get really concrete, boots on the ground feedback from are our kids. And our high schoolers they're very honest with you, and they tell you how it's going. And we take that very seriously. So again, the short answer is yes, but there is a process that we own and we run for those individuals to want to be part of that. And Ms. Stalbert and I can talk further about how to communicate such.
Madam Chair, we want to, at least I want to make sure that as we proceed, that when we speak of the CAC, the Citizen Advisory Committee on Diversity, we're speaking of that group that did great work and has presented it, and they've been, relieved of that duty. So they, as a structure, do not exist. However, members of the CAC can do as Dr. Houlihan has suggested. We don't want to talk as if that group is yet a present group anymore. They did great work, and we have their work and we're working with their work, but they are now citizens again and free to get on any of the various committees that Dr. Houlihan has. Just want to have that as a point.
That is correct. And this is the time typically that we begin identifying individuals who are interested in being part of my advisory councils. We don't implement that till the fall of every school year. So there is time if individuals want to volunteer their time to serve in that capacity.
I just want to piggyback on what Jimmy was saying. The whole purpose of the CAC Diversity Committee, their duty, they were charged to work with our consultant, Paradigm 360. When that contract with Paradigm 360 ended and they presented their final report, all of their work was complete once it was handed over to the board, and we asked staff, to go through the 4 recommendations. We've had other citizens advisory committees that have worked with consultants on realignment and redistricting. And those committees have always been formed to work with the consultant without any board interference. And when that consultant brings their final report to the board, we receive it and then work with staff and begin the progress. But so that work with Paradigm 360 did end, just like other committees that we've had, and the board received their final report in May, I think, April or May. Just like other committees, they came and made their presentation with a consultant at a board meeting. And the board received that information and directed staff to recommend to us how to implement those recommendations. So that's what's brought us here tonight. And I think what I heard Dr. Houlihan and staff say is that, people reach out and email and, reach out to us all the time with feedback, and we're always available to hear feedback. But if those individuals would like to continue their work, then what I'm hearing is we have our teacher committee with the superintendent. We have our parent committee with the superintendent. We have the student committee with the superintendent. And if they would like to continue that work, then I would encourage them to apply for one of those positions, appointments in the fall.
And Madam Chair, you have several members of this current board who are CACers on committee, me being one. So I know factually that when our work was done, we were done. So this isn't something, because again, you want to make sure that people understand, that they're cutting them off. No, they're cutting them. That's the process. And I was one of those CACs for realignment. And we worked hard and worked a long time, but when the job was over, it was over. And the board took it from there. That doesn't mean that because this work is serious work, it doesn't mean that quite possibly we may not can look to at some point maybe have some Pacific citizens just to consult. Doesn't mean we can't do that. I would not be opposed to anything like that. I just don't want to speak as if the CACD is yet, in operation. But we can at some point maybe gather from the community, as our good member, Pastor Fitzpatrick is saying, and get people to talk to the group. That would be good as well.
So one of the questions I had from the presentation tonight was when Mrs. Morris was very good in explaining that, and I don't have a question, but she was very good at explaining that there would be a review of internal processes for reporting code of ethic violations and communications with staff. I wanted to clarify that we're doing that for our students as well, because it was the students that felt the need to go to Instagram and report things. So I want to clarify with someone that we're doing the same as she identified for staff. How are we doing this for students so that they don't have to go, that they know where to go when there is an issue?
You are correct. When we mentioned staff, we should have also included the word students, because that is an important part of this review. So we will make sure to include that review of the internal reporting process for both students and staff. I think what Ms. Morris also commented on, and we have not done this in the past, is working with our school administrators and those in buildings to help them understand and to train them on how do you, when those incidents or allegations are reported, how do you then not only investigate, which we do, but close the feedback loop back with those individuals to make sure they understand that, number one, we take your complaint serious. Number two, while it may be confidential in nature and I can't share the outcome, we want to assure you that this has been handled. And number three, this will not be tolerated or accepted in the future. So that is additional work that's part of this process that we recognize we need to work on.
Thank you. That answers my question, because that's what brought this whole committee to the forefront, was because there were so many different Instagram pages that were being created, and students and former students were going there instead of letting us know so that we could go investigate it.
Question. So the committee was created because of Instagram posts?
It was created because we had multiple issues coming up in the district. And yes, at the time, we were getting a lot of emails from former students that this, and this had happened. And if you're a former student, how do we go handle something that wasn't handled at the time or investigated to take staff disciplinary actions or student disciplinary actions if it had been 2 years down the road?
I guess the reason why I asked when you said Instagram, because there are some things that you can see that's wrong and you don't even have to be on Instagram. And so
But we didn't know about it until we got the emails
Really?
They had never sent us emails or information before. Okay. And honestly, it was at the summer of last year, last June, last spring maybe.
So we're honestly saying that before they started posting, that we did not see that there were examples and issues with disparity, with racism, injustice within our school system. Is that what we're saying?
I'm not an employee of the district, so no, I had not been in 53 schools to see that.
I know that, so there's no need for that response because I know.
There's a lot of need for that response.
No, because when I say, Ms. Mayor, Madam Chair, when I say that, I'm not just speaking for you, but as I'm speaking to you, absolutely, but I'm speaking on behalf of all of us.
Any emails
Yes,
or
ma'am. May I
Instagram
finish my statement,
posts
please?
or anything until
May I
last
finish my
summer.
statement, please? What I'm saying is, everything does not run by what you see, but as a board, I believe that all of us can say, and hearing the voices of the people that we serve.
We had not heard any until last summer.
And that's the question I want to know. And that's the sad part. If no one has ever said anything in our district about injustice, about the things that we're dealing with, that's a problem. Because it did not just start when it was posted on Instagram. It did not just start last year. This is something that has been going on for years and years and years within our county. And so to say that we're just hearing about it because of Instagram posts and what former students have been posting, that's a problem to me because I hear it and I just got here. And even before being on the board, I've heard it. Being in the community, I've heard
You got
it.
here post 2020.
I understand that.
And so,
but what I'm talking about, the issues within our county, the issues within our county have been going on. I've gotten on the board during that time, but as I've stated before, I've been here all of my life, even before I was on the board. So what I'm saying is, now that all the pressure within our community, within our country, I'm trying to figure out why hasn't the board heard about it prior to that? That's my question, because maybe we've heard about it, but maybe we didn't pay any attention to it. Wow. If that's, and I take your statement and I go for what it is.
I have served on the board for 7 years, Gary Sides, since I'm being identified and spoken to here. Would you like to say if you had gotten any emails?
I'm speaking to whoever will respond.
I had never gotten any emails until last summer, and people were emailing me to make me go look at Instagram because I don't use Instagram.
I don't either.
We got emails last summer to go look at Instagram. So I did what our citizens asked us to do, and I went and looked at Instagram. I'm not an Instagram person. Now my teenagers love it. I am a 50-something-year-old woman, and I don't like Instagram. But because I got emails last summer, I went and looked at Instagram because community members emailed me and asked me to do so. I don't know if Mr. Moriel, Ms. Heintel, Mr. Helms, Mr. Sides, if you would like to comment on your email history and your use of Instagram.
I'd say, well, I don't use Instagram, so I don't know anything about it. I would say, and I don't know what kind of things you mean. Since I've been on the board, there have been people that have reached out through email on one thing or another. Something's happened in their classroom. Their kid got a cut. I mean, we get, and my responsibility, I see my responsibility is to direct it to the appropriate staff for action, investigation, what have you. I don't go calling up a principal and this mother said this. Right. I don't go calling a principal and saying, well, this boy alleges he was, I don't know, whatever from something else. I'm going to pass it along to the appropriate, usually Dr. Houlihan, and he filters it wherever it needs to go. So I don't know specifically what you mean as far as have I been directed. I've had feedback from people in the county since I've been on the board in one shape or another, somebody complaining about something or having a problem with
Same,
something.
but it wasn't
about this topic.
And it
No, it
What about
wasn't
racism?
specifically about this topic. I
right,
don't
but
recall any.
we would get complaints, maybe one a week or one every other week. It's not like we were, bombarded with emails about a particular thing. And I've been on the board for 5 years now, and it's not. Now there's always been discussions, or you hear discussions about the East and the West and things like that, particularly.
But it was about funding. How much
Yes.
money are we giving Monroe?
And
How much money are we giving Weddington? So we have that report.
And we've asked.
It was about money, not racism.
And we've asked Ms. McClan
Yes.
to put together a document as soon as she gets the school year closed and the budget for this year.
And again, this past
all
year,
that.
we got complaints about the Rebel at
I
Parkwood.
was
So
just
as
to
soon
say
as
that,
that came in, we addressed it. So, I mean, I can look you in the eye and tell you that last summer was when we started getting emails. And I was like, we need to address this, because students didn't feel safe or comfortable reporting it when they were enrolled in our schools. Then what are we doing? And so that's why we felt as a board we needed to put together a committee with our students to hear from our students, and then work with some of our employees, parents in the community, faith-based partners, and let's hear from the students and to find out about this, other than reading about something on Instagram that happened 2 or 4 years ago. But last summer is when we started getting these emails.
And like Mr. Side said and Ms. Merrill said, when we get emails from anybody in the community and they're saying that something happened in the school or whatever, we turn that over. And at that point, we're not involved in it anymore. Right, we can't be, because we sit as a quasi-judicial panel for things like this. You've been on the panel for student appeals of discipline and things like that. So we can't be the investigator. We have the investigators in our district that do them. But again, I agree. I mean, there's been little things through the time, but before that stuff was on Instagram a year ago, no. And she's correct. Some of the, I remember my daughter saying to me, there's stuff on Instagram. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And some of them were not the kid's name and stuff like that. How do you investigate these kind of things unless somebody's willing to come forward and tell us what's going on? I have never been in a situation where we've brought stuff to staff and they have not acted upon it and tried to find out what's going on. So I don't have that. The Parkwood Rebels may be one of the examples, and we took care of that because it was a policy issue.
As soon as it was brought to us, as soon as we got the email last year about the Parkwood Rebel, we took it straight to policy. So we are not employees. That is very important for people to understand. We are not employees. And as soon as you go to Raleigh and do your code of ethics training, and the North Carolina School Board Association trains board members, they tell you the rule number 1, as soon as a parent or employee or student contacts you with an issue, it is not your job to solve the answer. You direct them where they need to go to find their answer, or you turn it over to staff to get the answer. But it is in policy. We are not to do an investigation. We are not to get involved in day-to-day activities in the school, but we are to turn it over. So as soon as I got those emails, that is exactly what I did. I went to staff and I said, clearly there's a problem. Students did not feel comfortable reporting it then. They feel the need to create fake accounts to get the word out. And so we developed the committee and we hired a consultant.
So I would like to add that we've seen documents in the past regarding how much funding is given to each of the clusters, correct? And it's the perception that the East doesn't get what the West does, and that's just not the truth. And if you look at the if you look at the CIP that we do every year, the older schools are getting more of the stuff because they have more needs than we have. Than the West has.
Right. And I think it's more than just stuff.
I
and I understand exactly what you're saying. Ms. Hightail.
It's not stuff. It's needs at the
I
school.
think you said, I was just repeating what
Excuse
you,
me
no,
for
no, no.
that.
And I'm not just, if I don't take it, when you say stuff, I'm not listening to it
I
in a
mean
negative connotation.
Facilities, things
Right.
that need to happen.
And I understand
within the
exactly
zone.
what you're saying.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is, I think it's more than just the tangible things or the resources. I think it's more of relationship being built. Relationship buildings, excuse me. We had a town hall meeting yesterday, District 1 did, and it was an impromptu meeting, and it was 20 plus individuals. And the conversation that we had was very enlightening to hear from them. We opened up the doors and we allowed them to speak, to hear what they had to say. And when you hear from them, because I feel as though it's hard for me to serve them if I don't hear from them. And they began to share about different things, even during the meeting and outside of the meeting. So my question is, not my question, but my concern is for us to say that we're just hearing about it because of the Instagram post about the challenges and the issues within our county. That concerns me, because these are issues and challenges that have been going on for years and no one has heard them. I'm not saying that if you have not heard them, that's fine. I'm not here to sit here and say you're lying. That's not my stance right now. That's not where I come from, and that's not how I operate. I take what you say and I believe it. But what I am saying is, it's a challenge when I know of the issues and the challenges that the diversity committee have proposed, and these things have been ongoing for quite some time before Dr. Houlihan got here, and before all of us got on the board. These have been reoccurring issues and challenges. That's what I'm saying.
There's a lot. I understand what you're saying, except that there's a lot of there's things in the CAC report that we do currently. And I think that that's one of the things that's hard for me, is how we do so much communication. We do it through social media. We do it through emails. We do it through the principals. We do so many things. And to read the report, I'm sorry.
Peach jar.
I mean, we try to get out the information, and it was, for me, it's like, what can we do? What's the next thing that we can do to get stuff out? Because we think that we are getting it out. We talk about it in meetings, and Dr. Houlihan talks about it. But I think that was a hard thing to see too, because I knew about that. I knew about a lot of that stuff that was going on. So how are we not communicating when we do a lot of this stuff already? And I'm not saying everything before anybody comes after me. I'm not saying that the whole report is like that, but I was disappointed to see that that even though we do all this stuff, there's still a gap.
Right.
And
I don't believe they would have made the recommendations knowing that something is in place.
I'm not accusing.
Right, and I'm not saying you all are. I think some of y'all so used to people accusing you. I'm just expressing myself, all right, and sharing what I feel. So I'm not saying that you are feeling that way, but I'm saying that I don't believe that they would have made recommendations knowing that these things were in place. As I've said before, the recommendations, I see exactly what these recommendations are from both sides. And that's why I made the proposal, to see if the committee could have a conversation about it so they can understand what this is looking like and what their recommendations are going to look like through what Dr. Houlihan has proposed. I'm not disputing what he has proposed, but what I'm saying is, prior to even the proposal, it saddens me that prior to this Instagram post and what have you, that some are saying that we have not heard about these issues and challenges within Union County. Right. And I'm talking about, and I don't know which, somebody may not have, somebody may have, but what I'm saying is it's challenging when we say that we have not heard it. That's all I'm saying. When I know that it's been here for a long time.
Well, I'm just going to say again, I didn't get the emails until last summer. And as soon as I got the emails, I addressed it. Why do these students feel the need to create fake accounts and go to social media? We have to get, and that's why I brought the question up tonight. Mrs. Morris was very clear on how we were going to address what the process was going to be if staff needed to file a complaint or notify someone. So the very first opportunity I had to say, Mrs. Morris offered this, please help me understand what we're doing for our students, because I needed to remember what brought us here tonight, what brought us to needing this. It was the students telling us these stories on Instagram that none of us had ever heard before, and getting emails from alumni that we had never heard from before, and asking this board, what can we do? And we formed a committee and we hired a consultant, just like we did for realignment or any other need when we need to hire a third-party vendor to help advise us on, on what to do. So I hear what you're saying. I know these issues have been around for decades. I don't want you or anyone to walk away thinking that, she had never heard it until she got an email last summer. I had never heard that our students were having these issues until we got the emails last summer. And as soon as I heard it, as soon as I read it, I forwarded it to staff. I talked to the board, and we got approval to form a committee. We went to SPTT and got approval to spend money to hire a consultant. We went through SPTT to receive applications of everyone who wanted to serve on the committee. As soon as I got emails about Parkwood, I brought it to policy. I brought it to the board. And Reverend Benson, all of this has happened like in the last 14 months. Kirkpatrick, I'm sorry. I do apologize. I mean, all of this has happened like in the last 14 or 15 months. And when I got the email, I brought it to the board and sent it to staff. What can we do? Yeah. And so we've heard from the consultant. We've heard from the committee. We've sent it to staff. Staff has gone through all 4 recommendations. And now for the first time, we're hearing how staff thinks we can communicate this to our staff, how we can communicate this to our students, and hopefully make this a better school district. That's all I know to do.
Yeah, Madam Chair, during this process, I go back to one place. I go back to the night we heard from Olivia when she stood up and she spoke, and she was a senior, and she talked about the things that happened as a 9th grader. And all I kept thinking was process. Why did she not feel as though the process worked for her? She told someone, but it seemed as though it stopped. And so she stopped. I said that night, and I'm saying tonight, in light of Reverend Kirkpatrick's plea, that is one thing to talk in the community. It's one thing to talk amongst yourselves. It's one thing to talk collectively in a group. But you got to bring to bear to the power players that can get something done. And if you feel as though who you bring it to ain't getting nothing done, then you go to the next set of power players. Because if there's problems that is going on, and the people who can do something about it never get it, then there won't be a change. But if the people who are to do something about it get it and do nothing, then they need to change. I ain't got no problem with that. But we can't, no board, no committee, no state legislature, no Congress can be held accountable for what's talked about but never given. If we find that things have been given to people and they have not done their jobs, then we need to bring the bear to those people. But I believe, and I have one last question for staff that gave the presentation tonight. As you dove into this, what were you thinking? I know I'm getting you to speak to your own minds, but as you dove into that, what were you thinking? How serious was these issues for yourselves as you each had a part in this quad of presentation that we had tonight? What were you thinking? What did you hope, or what did you want to personally look at doing to make things better for folks that feel aggrieved?
I'll make a comment speaking for myself, Reverend Mitchell, and then I'll ask if anyone wants to comment on what they felt. As we met as a staff, my number one thought is A, this work is very important and serious. B, it's a lot to unpack. It's a lot that we need to go through. And C, this is going to take some time. This cannot be a conversation we have one time, check the box and move on. There's got to be some strategic and deliberate movement in these areas and the recommendations, understanding we can't accomplish every single thing listed in one bite. We've got to be realistic on how to proceed in a very strategic manner. Those were my three big takeaways. And the fourth one that I'll say that I was going to close with was, this is about getting better. As you heard Miss Merrill say, this is my 5 years in this school system. This board and our administration, our team, has been about one thing: being the best we can be, being the best school system in this state and in this nation. You can't do that unless you're focusing on continuous improvement. What we've received from our students, from our staff, from the committee is data. What we do with that data is part of the conversation tonight. This is an initial step forward of what to do with the data, but it's not the end. It's not the last step. Those are my four big, I guess, reflections as we were doing this work.
Excellent, thank you.
And I just want to remind everyone that the consultant did tell us that this is a big job. And it's going to take at least 24 to 36 months is what the consultant said for us to, implement, this process. So it is not going to happen in 21, 22. I mean, it's going to be a building block beginning in 21, 22, into 23, into 24. They said that this will take time. It will not happen overnight. Mrs. McClam?
I'll agree with what Dr. Houlihan, his points, as well as just evaluating some of the things we currently do and understanding that we can do, use more data, continue to gather data, find new data points to use demographics and other things when we do distributions of resources. So to continue to improve that process and just looking through what are some new ways we can do that. And like Dr. Houlihan said, continue to improve that, continue to be transparent and provide even looking at doing some digital dashboards and things that we mentioned in some of the staff recommendations.
I want to follow up on that. It's kind of on a digital dashboard. I've got a couple of requests or kind of like a vision for it. I think for it to be effective, we really need to have a map and make it graphical, be able to filter between clusters, middle, high,
Yes.
everything. Include all funding
Mr.
sources, including federal, state, local, even
there's a-
booster.
I'll say there is a lot of that information currently housed on state websites, but Mr. Parker and I have talked about ways that we might be able to do that visually on our
If you need
website
help
to
with
give
that,
you some
let me-
hover
Yeah.
options. And I really do hope that some of our new software capabilities will allow us to pull information out in a much easier to digest and loadable format where he could be able to do that for us.
Yeah, but even including like Booster Club, gifts and bequests, everything. I mean, that'd be good.
Yeah,
See.
that will definitely be something we look to in
Yeah.
the future. We could probably build on some of that.
You're,
for
you're
sure.
going to have to build it over time.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I would like to ask Mrs. McLam, I know over the past 2 or 3 years, you don't have, I just want to ask you, I know that you and your department are working very hard right now to close the books on this school year. But you have worked over the past several years with Kathy and I to get a report to find out where the money is going for each cluster and how the money is being spent in all 9 clusters. And I would ask you that as soon as possible, I don't know if you could have this in the next couple of weeks, if you could have this in time for the August board meeting, but I would like to provide the full board and the public the past reports that you have provided us and show historically where all the money has gone so that we can hopefully ease this east versus west conversation so that people can see where the money is going. So you know the report I'm talking about. If your team, if you can get pull the existing one up and keep that document and add a new column with 2020-21 figures to that existing report and get it to the superintendent and to the board as soon as possible. Within the next couple of weeks or in time for the August board meeting. Okay. Are there any other questions? Are there any other questions for the superintendent on the citizen or staff on this presentation tonight on their response to the 4 recommendations? Hearing none, we will move to Mr. Sides. You made an amendment for policy 3-2A.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll pass out copies. As we've heard tonight and previous meetings, we have, not only in Union County, but in our state and our country, parents are concerned about bias creeping into their students' curriculum. And in an effort to ensure the accuracy and consistency of UCPS curriculum, I'd like to offer the following amendment to policy 3.2A, Employee Code of Ethics and Standards of Conduct, to be presented to the policy committee for their consideration. And I'll read this real briefly. And Donna, we got an extra copy for you, so you don't have to write as fast as you can. This will go under the item of personnel-political activities following the 4th paragraph, which ends, teachers will always present political and civil issues without personal bias and with reasonable effort to present all sides of issues. I would add UCPS employees shall not promote the following concepts. One race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. An individual solely by virtue of his or her race or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. An individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partly because of his race or sex. An individual's moral character is necessarily determined by his or her race or sex. An individual solely by virtue of his race or sex bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. Any individual solely by virtue of his race or sex should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress. That the belief that the United States is a meritocracy or an inherently racist or sexist belief, or that the United States was created by members of a particular race or sex for the purpose of oppressing members of another race or sex. And for the purposes of this policy, promote shall be defined, shall mean any of the following: compelling students, teachers, administrators, or other school employees to affirm or profess belief in the concepts described in subsection of this policy, including concepts described in the section above: curricular, reading lists, seminars, workshops, trainings, or other educational or professional settings in a manner that could reasonably give rise to the appearance of official sponsorship, approval, or endorsement. Contracting with, hiring, or otherwise engaging speakers, consultants, diversity trainers, or other persons for the purpose of advocating concepts described in the above section. I will offer a motion to ask the board to approve to send this working copy for the consideration of the policy committee.
Second.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Sides or any comments?
I have a question. I'm looking at Mr. Sides. It says Union County Public School employees should not promote the following concepts. And I'm looking at the last part, that the belief that the United States is, say that word, I'm going to be honest.
Meritocracy.
Thank you, meritocracy, all right. It is inherently racist or sexist belief, or that the United States was created by members of a particular race or sex for the purpose of oppressing members of another race or sex. Now, if we're going to talk about history, I think that part needs to be taken out, because if we really deal with history the right way, I'm not talking about what's going on now, but the creation of it, this is a false statement.
Let me ask you, you are a member of the policy committee, correct?
Yes.
Well, I would just, as I said, I would like to submit this as a working document to be considered by the policy committee, and your concerns, I think, should be addressed in that format. And if the committee majority believes that it should be changed, deleted, modified before, if and when it does come back to the full board, that's fine by me.
All right. So you're proposing to present this to us, okay, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second on the floor. If there are no other comments or questions, then all those in favor of sending this to the policy committee, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, 9-0. So the motion passes 9-0. We'll send this to the next policy meeting. So we'll work with Todd Price, who is the chair of policy. Okay, that brings us to
Board comments, right?
Yeah, board comments.
Board comments. I think.
board comments.
I have a comment. I posted this on my BOE page, but I wanted to talk about it here, about our budget. I want to say thank you to the county manager and the county deputy manager for working with our staff, Dr. Houlihan and Ms. McLean, on our budget. Thank you to the commissioners that approved the UCPS budget request. Because of that, we received an additional $5.5 million this year from the county, increase from the county, together with all our redirects. We can now talk about doing In addition to our state mandated increases, and Shauna, please correct me if I'm wrong because it's 10 o'clock, which I'm sure you're way tired than I am. Compensation increases for transportation and support staff, supplement increases for classroom teachers that have not happened since 2017, supplement increases for school nurses, psychologists, and social workers that they have not gotten an increase since 2012. Bus driver salary increases to be competitive, a cyber security network position, and high school athletic directors additional month of employment. Did I miss anything? I got it? Okay, so I just want to thank everybody and everybody know that this is coming and we're still working on some year-end stuff for when that all is going to happen. So stay involved and we should take it through finance when it happens, correct, Ms. McLam? Say yes. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other board comments?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I held back from some comments during the salary part for time, but I do want to thank Dr. Houlihan, but also I wanted to chime in on staff and thank them for assisting him during this past year and all of the craziness that they had to endure. I know a lot of these individuals personally, and they have been working extremely hard. We talk about frontliners, we talk about essential personnel, and I believe that they've been quite essential to the citizenry of Union County as far as their participation in helping Union County Public Schools stay afloat during the time of great turbulency of 2020 and 2021. So this Marine salutes you all. And, you know, a lot of people don't know that Dr. Houlihan, I can't say it enough, is a basketball player. And so I have a special affinity for that. You know, as coaches, we stick together. So thank you, Dr. Houlihan and team. Y'all have done a tremendous job. Mr. Howard, with all that the information and dealing with the press, you know, you do great work. So we appreciate all of you all for all that you do.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I would like to address a comment that I made at the curriculum meeting. One of the things that I think in one of our meetings you made mention that that you were never too big to come back if you've made a mistake or what have you, and I'm the same way. We were talking in the curriculum meeting, and I made mention to a flag that I had saw. I had saw the flag, but as I was driving, I saw it again. I had two of the colors wrong on the flag, from the flag that I previously saw the first time to the flag that I saw during that day, if that makes sense. And it was the black and white and blue flag. The flag that I first saw was black and white. And when I did some research on the flag, and I said the black, white, and blue flag, but the research that I did was not on the black, white, and blue flag. It was on the black and white flag. And when I made the comment, the black, blue, and white flag is in representation to our police officers and what have you. And I did receive a couple of emails, and like I said, I'm never too big to come back and retract and even apologize. I have a aunt who was a retired police officer in Detroit, as well as armed forces. My dad and my brother-in-law and my wife's grandfather served in the armed forces. So I would never try to contaminate something that has great intention. I was just talking fast like I do. I guess a little country boy from North Carolina, Marshville. And when I get excited, I talk fast. And so I wanted to make that known to all police officers, armed forcemen, individuals within this community that one lady asked, well, do you support the armed forces? Absolutely. There are some phenomenal police officers in this county, in this community. and in this state, and I know quite a few of them. So I wanted to make that known tonight. All right, that Reverend Kirkpatrick is not against police officers. All right, he's against injustice, but he's not against police officers. Good police officers. So I wanted to make that known tonight and apologize for making that mix up with those two flags on that curriculum meeting.
Thank you very much. Any other board comments? Hearing none, we will move to announcements. I don't know.
The SPTT committee is scheduled to meet July 28th. Otherwise on the spit at 7:30 here at the PDC.
Policy will meet after that, Wednesday, the 28th at 9 o'clock here at PDC.
Danny, do you know when facilities is? Thank you. July 20, 9 a.m. PDC. No, it's virtual. It's virtual. It's virtual. See, I remembered that part.
This is, excuse me, ma'am.
Sorry.
No, ma'am. This is for, go ahead. I promise you it's your turn.
I'm sorry. And curriculum, me and you.
Yes, ma'am.
We're going to meet on the 22nd at 10 a.m.
When's policy again?
28th. Reverend Kirkpatrick.
Okay, all right. I had to make sure. District 1 town hall meeting will be August the 2nd at 6:30 p.m. Any of our board members, staff of Union County Public Schools, you're welcome to come. This one will be also at Rehoboth Church, 600 East Franklin Street, Monroe, North Carolina. Our objective is to meet every first Monday of the month. All right, for until now, until the remainder of the year, and then we will look at alternating every other month or what have you.
And finances to be determined. We'll send that out to the board members to make you aware of the finance committee once they have a chance to talk. Okay. Are there any other announcements? Hearing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.